Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the August 25, 2020 City of Griffin Board of Commissioners regular scheduled meeting. We'll open up with Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Murray, followed with invocation with Commissioner Truman Tinsley III. If you'll please rise.
Everyone rise. Please face the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, we are here today to ask for your blessings and guidance in the performance of our duties as elected officials. We pray for strength, love, knowledge, and understanding. Help us to recognize and solve the problems that are presented. Make our solutions fair and just to the best interests of everyone. Help us to overcome our shortcomings and keep us united as a team to work for the betterment of the city and its people. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We have the agenda as presented. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Tinsley with a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Brock. All in favor, signal by saying aye, or raise your hand. 7-0. First item is citizen comments. At this time, the mayor opens the floor to comments from the audience. Comments should relate to a specific agenda item not listed on the agenda for a public hearing. Again, let me repeat, not listed on the agenda for a public hearing, or to a concern within the jurisdiction of the city. Commission meetings serve the purpose of conducting city business and are not a forum for the unlimited expression of opinion. The mayor reserves the right to limit comments to matters germane to city business and may refer speakers to the city manager or other staff for resolution. With that being said, is there anybody on my left side like to come before the board? Anybody on my left side? Anybody on my right side would like to come? Yes, Ms. Kim, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Kim Williams. I'm at 502 South 6th Street. I was wondering if I could get an update on where the new diversity and inclusion board, where are we on that issue? Have we settled up any other stakes? Is there a timeline at least?
Mr. Smith, I know we've been taking names. Do you know where we're?
Yes, sir. We just completed a letter that will be going out tomorrow to the members that have been nominated, and that will have a date and information, follow-up information on it. That'll go out tomorrow.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there anybody else on my right that'd like to come before the board? Come forward, Mr. Dutton. Name and address for the record, please.
James Dutton, 221 Laramie Road. I actually have two issues that are on the agenda tonight. One is the constitutionally protected and God-given freedom of addressing our elected officials. We can address you in the past, we can address you tonight, we can address you in the future. And any chilling of that in any way through threat, coercion, or board vote is in fact not constitutional. If anyone has told you something other than that, that someone can only come and address you so many times, or if there's only so much someone can say, they are either grossly incompetent or they are lying to you. I don't think anyone around this area that the board works with is grossly incompetent. And thus, we must ask ourselves, why would someone lie to you? The second is the idea of sovereign immunity. You as elected officials, working in your capacity, have the protection of sovereign immunity. You can be named in a lawsuit. Anyone can be named in a lawsuit. Federal prisoners sue the moon every year, quite literally. And as soon as it gets to a judge, any lawsuit that names you for acts that you do during your official capacity will be thrown out just as quickly as those judges throw the suits against the moon out. You have sovereign immunity in what you do. And again, if anyone says that you don't, remember what I just said about the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Is there anybody else on my right like to come before the board? One last call. Thank you very much. Moving into public hearing. Public hearings are conducted to allow public comments on specific advertised issues such as rezoning, ordinances, policy development, operating budgets, and other legislative actions to be considered by the city commission. Legal counsel has asked me to read one statement before we move into the hearing. It's item 408E under Proceedings. At the official public hearings conducted by the Board of Commissioners, the chairman announced the proposed request under consideration that the printed copies of the adopted standards governing exercise of the zoning power and procedures governing the hearing are available to the public. The zoning administrator shall advise the commission of the nature of the decision sought and the recommendation of the planning and zoning board and city staff when applicable. The applicant or his attorney may, when address the commission, proponents, including the applicant or his attorney, shall have no less than 10 minutes for presentations of data, evidence, and expert opinions. Opponents of the proposed decision shall have an equal minimum period of time. The chairman may grant additional time, provided, however, an equal period of time shall be granted both sides. The chairman may limit repetitious comments in the interest of time and may call for a show of hands to those persons present in favor or opposed to the proposed decision. It shall be the duty of the chairman to maintain decorum and to assure the public hearing on a proposed decision is conducted in a fair and orderly manner. Zoning and variance request decisions shall be placed on the agenda in the order in which they are filed with the zoning administrator. So there are copies of that available if anybody has an interest, from my understanding. So moving into the first item, this is a public hearing, and we will treat each person fairly and justly through this process, and we will be patient as everyone has an opportunity to express their opinion. So item 1 is receive comments regarding a request to rezone property located at 670 South Hill Street consisting of 4.296 plus or minus acres from low-density residential B to, which is Ldrb, to medium-density residential MDR. Director of Planning and Development, Director Chad Jacobs will address. Good evening, Mr. Jacobs.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So what I have before you this evening, it's going to be a little unorthodox, but we're going to kind of go through a little bit of historical, kind of reference how we got to staff recommendations through P&Z and things of that nature, and give you guys a little bit of background of the application. So with that, okay. So actually, the applicant is seeking approval for rezoning of approximately 4.296 acres at 670 South Hill Street from Ldrb, which is low-density residential B, to MDR, medium-density residential, to develop a 15-lot, single-family residential subdivision. I have the concept plan up for y'all to view. This is, the lots would be at a minimum a quarter acre in size and developed on a single cul-de-sac street, as you can see here. The concept plan indicates 3 different breakdowns of square footages. So currently, as submitted, these 3 homes here in the back would represent 1,800 square foot homes. Then the 6, kind of as you get here into the middle portion, would then move to 2,050 heated square feet. Then the 6 that are here towards the front, towards Milner, would then grow to 2,200 square feet heated. So that's the plan that's been submitted with the application. With that, if we can move to the flume. So whenever we receive a request for rezoning, one of the first documents that all planning staff are going to go to is going to be the comprehensive plan and the associated future land use map. That's an extremely important tool for all of our planning initiatives and all of our zoning initiatives. So in this instance, what you have before you now is a shot of the current future land use map from the 2018 comprehensive plan. So this here is the property in question that you can see here at the corner of Milner and South Hill Street. What this yellow represents is residential. So that is the residentially planned land use designation. Okay, this in red is a commercial land use designation. This kind of off gray color is institutional, and this green is like Parks and Rec type land use designations. So in this instance, you can see here that the residential land use designation is compliant with the request as submitted. One thing that I would like to note, there has been some discussion previously with respect to spot zoning, concerns of spot zoning. So I would like to address that with y'all right out of the gate. Spot zoning is when you, to give like a, for instance, if you have a residential neighborhood and let's say you've got a corner lot that's in the midst of everything around it that's residential and somebody's proposing a commercial land use. That's a classic spot zone. Where it's not a spot zone is where you have a use that's going from a request to go from one residential designation to another residential designation. And really the only difference that's kind of separating these is essentially a question of density and maybe house size. But the land use is still the same. Okay, so I wanted to address that out of the gate, whereas this wouldn't necessarily be a spot zone request. More importantly, in every zoning case that you see too, the courts are usually going to fall back to on what does your comp plan say. So if it's lining up with your comp plan, you're not in danger of a spot zone. Okay? So with that, let's move to the zoning map. Mr. Cotton? Okay, so here is now a map of your current zoning. So obviously, the comprehensive plan and the land use map is where you're kind of moving in the next 20 years. This is where we are currently. So this is what's before y'all this evening and the request to move from Ldrb to medium density residential. So as you can see, yes, there is a large amount of Ldrb. The vast majority of this area is zoned low density residential B. So one of the things that I also want you guys to kind of think about as we consider this application, what we're bound by is section 405, the rezoning evaluation criteria that's found in the UDC. And there's 9 criteria within that. And they all should be considered with equal weight. And that's essentially what you have in the staff report that's before y'all that is submitted. So we have to address each one of those sections in the staff report. Upon information that's been supplied to us, statements, things that have come in from the public, and even comments that were given at planning and zoning, what it's kind of appeared is that there are really 3 of these categories that are really, where it's kind of boiling down to, that's probably the main point of the discussion. So, and these 3 are existing uses and zoning of adjacent property, whether the property to be affected has a reasonable economic use as currently zoned, that's a key phrase, although such use may not be its highest and best potential use. And then finally, the compatibility of applicant's proposed use of the property if rezoned with surrounding properties and uses. So yes, the vast majority of the area is zoned Ldrb, but I do think it's important to note that you do have a large swath here of planned commercial district, which is PCD, in close proximity. There is also to the south medium density residential, and that was brought up to our attention at planning and zoning last Monday night, that this property went through a rezoning process, and this would be 708 South Hill. So we did some research on that because obviously we don't want to misrepresent anything. And we did come to the conclusion that yes, in 2014, there was a rezoning request for 708 South Hill Street, and it was for the 3¼ acres in this area that went from medium density residential, this was previously medium density residential in 2014, to Ldrb. Also, in the course of researching that application, we also ran across another application for the same property. It was a special use permit that was approved in 2018 for a place of assembly with respect to tourism as it relates to, I believe, there's 3 operating wooden carousels. So that was something that we ran across as well. So in the course of also looking at this as it relates to those 3 criteria that we were talking about, one thing of note to point out, while this is zoned Ldrb, all of these lots have been cut decades ago. So the vast majority of these lots existed prior to even the zoning designation that's on it at this stage in the game. So, and what a large majority of these lots are essentially what we refer to as legal nonconforming or grandfathered. So under the Ldrb class, where you have to have a minimum of a half acre and 80 feet of road frontage, a large number of these lots don't comply with that today, so they're grandfathered. And that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's something worth noting, as when we're looking at in terms of compatibility of lot sizes, okay? So another thing to consider is we've highlighted here in blue 2 parcels. These are multifamily parcels. So obviously we all know that this is an apartment complex that sits catty-corner to the subject property. And then there's another multifamily use that's an older house that was converted into a multifamily use. This is important to note as we're looking at the question of reasonable economic return, okay? All right, next one. So in the course of review of the application, we looked at basically a square mile area from the subject property using GIS data. This is a drill down representation here because if we stayed all the way out, it would be hard to see these numbers. But essentially, you would see a lot of the same. So if you look at the GIS shows it as 4.36 in here, you see a number of lots that are very close and adjacent to the property that are coming out in the quarter acre, third of an acre realm, even on up to the halves and larger. So what we did was an analysis and tried to break this down in reference to your quarter acre tracts, because that relates to MDR. Your third of an acre tracts, because that's tied to LDRC, and then LDRB is a half. But obviously not all these tracts are going to be exact quarter, third, and half. So you have to kind of have a little bit of a sliding scale to try to get some type of idea of what's out there. So that's why you kind of see this the way that it is. And essentially what we found was that there's really no discernible trend. There's a lot of quarter acre lots out there. There's a lot of third. There's a lot of half on up to a full acre. So that plays into the idea of when you're looking at kind of what's surrounding you, and is this compatible and contiguous to the things that are contiguous to you, okay? So in addition to that, we also looked at heated square footages. Next slide. So this is data that was pulled from Wayne Gap with the tax assessors. And just kind of taking a look at, again, kind of what's in the area is what's being requested of the applicant, kind of GHON with what's out there. So, and what we found was, much like the lot sizes, it really kind of runs the gambit. So you have there's a lot of properties that run in here. I mean, you see some that are 1142, and then they go on up to, even almost 4,000 square feet and 4,100 square feet. There's 778. Like I said, it really kind of runs the gambit a little bit. We wanted to do this obviously in an effort to kind of, before you make a recommendation, you kind of want to see what's out there. Is this going to fit in? So that was a lot of the information that we kind of looked at. Then we got to kind of thinking about it a little bit more and kind of looking at, because there were some concerns that, this doesn't really fit in with what's out there. And then so this was something that was a little bit of an epiphany, kind of an aha moment somewhat. Got the next one again. The animation. So if you guys just take a minute to watch this animation. So we kind of got looking at what's up to the northeast of the subject property. If you just kind of give it a minute and watch. Kind of took that existing cul-de-sac, looked at the 10 houses that are off of this existing cul-de-sac, and we were kind of curious and just flipped it over. And boom, it fits right in there. So it was just something, so that way, just as a staff, to be fair, to establish, you know, there is a little bit of this kind of lines up a little bit. Here again, there's no real discernible size trends or things of that nature. So it was just something that was kind of interesting to us. So all that being said, staff does recommend conditional approval of the request. We do recommend it to medium-density residential, but with the following conditions. Development of the property is subject to the concept plan submitted, but shall be revised to accommodate area for stormwater detention and a total number of lots not to exceed 12. B, all houses shall be subject to the elevation of the submitted house plan. Any additional designs shall be approved by staff prior to permitting, ensuring compliance with the applicant's original zoning presentation. C, heated square footages of all proposed dwellings shall be as presented in the application submitted by the applicant, but amended to 4 at 1,800 square feet, 4 at 2,050 heated square feet, and 4 at 2,200 heated square feet to reflect the 12-lot maximum. And finally, D, a vegetative buffer shall be established along the South Hill Street right-of-way to visually shield the rear of the dwellings from view. Existing vegetation is acceptable, but must be marked on the development plan and staked with trees saved during construction. If to be a replanted buffer, a landscape plan shall be submitted and approved by staff prior to issuance of a land disturbance permit. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
So at this time, before we move into the applicant and the audience, does the board have any questions for clarification at this point in time?
I do have one. In terms of the vegetative buffer, what is the anticipated dimensions, or how wide, or how do you discern what is the?
That's a great question, and that's part of the reason of why looking at the quarter-acre lots versus a third of an acre lot, that would be reflected in the LDRC. The quarter-acre lot allows the developer and the engineer an opportunity to give a little bit more design flexibility, so that way we can figure out what would be best with respect to providing a buffer. Where we're at a little bit of a loss is once they get in there and start doing the engineering work to establish stormwater and things of that nature, where a pond may or may not need to be here or there, to try to figure out how much space can you save.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes,
there's
sir.
2 houses that are directly to the north of there. There's also a house to the east that's on Milner. When you talk about a vegetative buffer on the Hill Street side, why isn't there a recommendation to have some type of vegetative
Sure.
buffer to protect those?
The idea with this is basically to provide a shield both from the residents looking out, on Hill Street, because it's the backside of those houses there where those houses would be on the cul-de-sac, and then also vice versa, to shield the backside of the houses from the street as well. So that's essentially the thought process that went into that, to kind of shield the backside of the houses.
And then on the rezoning, stepping one step back from LDRB, would it be LDRBC? I know you kind of mentioned it
Yes, sir.
with Commissioner Flowers, but to jump a whole zoning code to MDR versus if you stick with
really-
LDRC,
yeah.
you would have a third acre lot, which is most of what Milner Avenue is. You would have,
I really
Higher.
gave LDRC a strong consideration, and then when I did the math on it, basically the way that it worked out was you could fit basically 12 third of an acre lots in there. It didn't really leave a lot of room for, here again, if we're trying to figure out a potential buffering process or things of that nature. That's kind of, so that's,
but if you went.
I went back and forth with
But
it.
if you went with LDRC with that same concept of buffering, then you'd,
I don't know.
instead of
Yeah.
12, you might have been 10. I mean.
Sure, yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
so-
topic of discussion, absolutely.
Does the staff, commissioners have any other?
Chad?
Yes.
One more question. I know you talked about the comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
Did you show a slide for that, or how that fits into it? You did?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It was the second one, so after the concept plan, so it was all, yeah.
I'm sorry
there
to
it
go
is.
back.
Yes, so
Okay.
it's that one. So that's going to be your future land use map. So, and again, all that yellow represents your residential.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Somehow I missed that one, sorry, thanks.
No worries.
Anything else from the commissioners? Anything else from staff?
I'm good.
So my assumption now we'll move into the applicant's
Yes, sir.
presentation.
Yes,
So
sir.
at this time, if the applicant would like to come before the board? Welcome, Mr. Galloway.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Newton Galloway on behalf of the applicant. We will only have 3 speakers tonight. The first will be Mr. Wright Garland, who's the architect and designer on the project. The second will be Mr. Lance Tolan Jr., who's the developer, and then me.
Thank you.
Recognizing that some of you may not have a good view of the screen, I have duplicates.
We also have
PowerPoint.
we also have a screen here in front of us. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is Wright Gardner, an architect. Just to give you a little brief background on myself, I moved to Atlanta in 1998, young architect, wanting to move to the big city to do big stuff. After working for big firms for a few years, I came to understand that my passion was working on smaller projects that affect people's daily lives, where they live, close to home. As such, I started my own firm in mid-2000s. I'm primarily doing residential work of all sizes, houses, apartments, townhomes, that kind of thing. So since the middle of 2000, I've been working primarily in the residential realm. So I have a great deal of experience in designing residential houses in town neighborhoods in Atlanta, Alpharetta, Noonan, Peachtree City, Fayetteville, all around Metro Atlanta. So I've been around for a while and been doing this kind of work. Just to talk a little bit about this project, if you could move to the next slide. This is just an aerial view of the Hill Street property with the 15 houses that we had proposed. When we began evaluating the property, we were looking for what would be the right scale of a project, what kind of fit into the house size of the neighborhood, lot size. Didn't want to, trying to maximize the density as much as possible, but also trying to provide as much value as possible. So we devised a plan that has primarily quarter-acre, a little over quarter-acre lots, just based on the 4 acres that's available. The house sizes, as mentioned previously, are in the 2,000 square foot range, all compatible and with the existing neighborhood, existing size houses, existing size lots, but current houses that meet the demands of the way people live today versus the way they lived when the houses in the neighborhood were primarily built. So it's an upgrade. It's envisioned as an upgrade to, or just more of a current way of living, building houses that are conducive to the way people live today. And settling on 15 houses it's not a super dense neighborhood, so we're not drastically increasing the traffic flow. We laid out the lot on a cul-de-sac primarily to keep the primary entrance off of South Hill, which is a very busy street, and also allowing for that buffer along Hill Street, which is basically currently there, trying to keep the same character of the neighborhood. So that's primarily the idea is that we're trying to build houses that are a contribution to the neighborhood, new citizens, new friends and neighbors that can live in the neighborhood and enjoy the benefits. I've come to know the developer over the past few years. We worked together on several projects, and they always overachieve in what they're trying to do. Their finishes are always the best. Their houses are they really try to do the best thing and add the most value to their neighborhoods. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Harlan.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. My name's Lance Tolan Jr. As you can see, that we're just not proposing to build your average cookie cutter neighborhood here. We're looking to build quality. We're not going to put our name behind something that's junk. If you can go to slide number 7, just to give you an idea of our
Mr.
past-
Tolan, if you can hold 1 second. I'm still getting reports of no sound. Is it? Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, if you can go to slide number 7, I believe.
Is that 7?
Yeah, no, it's, try 8. It's the 37. Yeah, there we go. So this is our Buckhead project. It's a walking distance of Lennox and Phipps. Originally, it's a similar scenario. There was originally a old mansion there. It's about a 2.5 acre parcel. It had vagrants living there. We acquired the property, did the site development, did the vertical construction, and sold the homes in the mid-7s to 800s. And the project was a success. And we've also done projects in the coastal area, St. Simon's Island, which we're wrapping that up and have 1 unit remaining for sale. Camellia Hill, I believe it's going to be an anchor for the neighborhood. It's going to spur quality development. You know, the new trend now is walkability to your downtown area and the downtown amenities. So we believe Camellia Hill, our development with 15 units, will bring value to the neighborhood. And we need 15 units because with 12 units, it simply just doesn't work. The profit isn't there for us. I mean, obviously, we need to make the numbers work. You know, it's a challenging site, you know, with some topo challenges. And, you know, we have a lot of unknowns, such as water mitigation. So we don't know what those numbers are right now because we haven't gotten that far with our engineer. And we really need the additional 3 lots to make this work.
Mr. Tolan, can you, for the picture that I saw, the 1s, 2s, and 3s, can you kind of give me an idea of the value or what, like sale price, or
We're
does
looking
it
at the
vary?
mid-3s. I mean, we really don't have any comps for this area in the infill. I mean, we're pioneers. So I believe there is a market for it with, you know, young professionals, doctors, lawyers, and people trying to get out of the big city and moving to Griffin.
Okay. So I guess the other question was, I'm just used to like developments all around me. Is it owner finance, or they're on their own, or how?
There'll be fee simple single family detached.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners.
Yes, sir.
Could you go to slide 4, please? Next one. This is a 3D view of what's being proposed and how the houses will sit on the property. And if you could also go, Mr. Tolan also has pictures of his Glenn County development at St. Simon's. Could you go down to about slide 8 or 9, please? That's the interior of the finishes they have at 3700 Peachtree. Obviously, those are townhomes. Go to the next slide. This is a proposed development they're working on called Whetstone Mill, also in Atlanta. And the next slide, please, sir. This is Glen Oaks at St. Simon's. And in fact, there are probably certain similarities between the houses that they have built there and what's proposed here. So you have an idea of what they're planning to do. And I would point out, as y'all know, the Tolans are local. So they have great incentive to not develop something that's inappropriate for that property. If, as all of us sit here and as I told the Planning Commission, in the best case scenario, someone would have potentially come up, been willing to incur the cost and renovate the house. It is a pretty house. It is a stately house on what would be a beautifully landscaped yard. All right, sorry about that. But That didn't happen. The market ultimately didn't allow that to occur. And from my perspective as a city resident and somebody who's endured 30 years of zoning hearings, the next question is, if the house is not going to be preserved, what is the next best option? Now, the goal would be, from a zoning perspective, to eliminate risk that something else is developed on South Hill that is not single-family. That's the greatest risk that could occur. And if that were to occur, then it carries forward almost potentially like a domino effect, because you have commercial property on the north end of South Hill. Now, I would offer a fairly blunt word of caution. Sometimes you have to be careful about what you ask for. Now, you are presented with a decent development that increases the average size of the houses in the area and increases the average value. And Mr. Jacobs' report analyzes your zoning criteria in section 405 directly and correctly. If we could go to the next slide, please. Next slide. This is your flume that he showed you, which shows that the development is compliant with the flume. The next slide. The next slide is the zoning map in a little different format than he presented. I will come back to that later. But his representations as to what's around the property were exactly right. Go to the next slide, please. Not knowing that staff was going to do an analysis with a radius of 1 mile, we identified the area in red and presented this data to the Planning Commission to look at compatibility. And if you will, now our data was not scientific, though we identified what I think is a credible geographic area to determine what's compatible with the area. And if you would go to the next slide, please. This is what our data showed regarding heated square footage. The demarc line is roughly 2,000 square feet, half below, roughly half above. Next slide, please. Neighborhood lot size. Mr. Jacobs' data is actually a little more favorable to us than our data. Plainly, there is the bulk of the lots within the study area are between 1/4 and 1/2 acre. Can you go to the next slide, please? And then we looked at value, and we based it on just tax ad valorem assessments. And you can see again, using 200,000 as the demarc point, the bulk of the houses, a significant majority of the houses, are under 200,000. Now, one of the things that we heard, the opponents, well-meaning proponents at the Planning Commission said, okay, if the house is going to be gone, let them develop as it is zoned. Let's go to the next slide. This is what 8 lots, half-acre lots, would look like, which can be developed today as a matter of right. The squares within the lots, or the quadrilaterals within the lots, represent the buildable area of the lots, after you take into account the setbacks. Because this can be developed as a matter of right, there's not going to be any infrastructure required, and you just have road frontage, curb cut lots. If you go to the next slide, please. If this were to be superimposed on the tract, this is what it looks like. Again, this can be done as a matter of right, and it is a terrible result. The houses would be 1,800 square foot under 8 Ldrb, but then they would be configured on lots that are incoherent and would cause, in my opinion, damage to the adjoining properties. Now, and you would wind up with 5 curve-cut driveways on South Hill and 3 on Milner. The ability to incur more cost to build the cul-de-sac, to keep the street frontage on South Hill protected is worth the cost of the road. And the other benefit it has is that if you look, remember the development plan, it protects the buffers, the vegetative buffers that exist now on South Hill. Now, again, this is not a good outcome, but it can be built as a matter of right. What Mr. Jacobs' staff report does, and Mr. Mayor, you alluded to this, he allows the density that would be under LDRC, but he allows the lots to be concentrated, to be reduced, so you can have more room for those buffers and areas for detention.
Hey, Mr. Galloway?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm looking at this, your slide, and so going back to the comprehensive plan, where exactly, I know Mr. Chad put the point or quarter to half acre, where else in this area do we have the 0.2 or 0.25 or less? Is there, other than maybe what's on across the
His
road?
map showed the lots. My data just showed the comparison of how the lots fit, or
Okay.
the number of lots. His map is actually more useful than our data. But if you go back up 3 slides.
I'm sorry
I think it's
about
3
that. I
slides.
was just comparing to just see,
Here we
in
go.
the area, are there any other of that size?
In the study area that we did, we found 18 lots at 0.25 or less, and you can see the bulk of the lots are 0.25 to 0.3.
Okay.
And one of the points I made at Planning Commission is the beauty of this tract is also what provides the greatest risk, because you have a 4-acre tract in an urban area. That urban area is bounded, or that particular lot is bounded on 2 sides by public streets, one of which is a thoroughfare and with a red light. Now, if we could then go on, and I'll be wrapping up shortly. Keep going on the slides. Just for your academic enjoyment, as Chad said, this is a definition of spot zoning, and he called the definition exactly correctly, but this is where it comes from. It's case law that defines what spot zoning is. And if you go to the next slide, please, which brings us back to the zoning map. And there's risk here, because even though catty-cornered across the way you have apartments, that property, okay, now I pull this from your zoning map that's on the web. The apartments across and catty-cornered are, as best I can tell, zoned commercial. Now, that commercial goes on down the road. And if you'll look back up toward Grace Street, and there is a discrepancy between this map and the map that Chad presented you, and also what appears if you do the overlay on the Spalding County tax assessors. But on your map, or this map, all of the properties from Oak down to Grafe that front on South Hill are commercial, already zoned commercial. And as I discussed at the P&Z meeting, last year, one of the big houses at Grafe and South Hill came on the market, and I was sitting there cringing, what's going to happen to that? That house was purchased, but the other house, one lot above, and this is true on any zoning map you will look at, is zoned commercial.
Now, it's commercial, help me out on this, because it's doctor's office, those are commercial, or
that's-
how is that? Like on Graf Street?
Commissioner, I don't know why it's on commercial. Now, I do not know whether that I don't know which of these maps is correct, but irrespective, you already have commercial encroachment, and
Well, I think that may be an error, because I believe those Hill Street lots on the, what was the Crouch property side are still zoned LDRB.
well, like I say, I couldn't tell you. All I'm saying is, I'm pointing it out to you. But the bottom line is, and I come back to what I said, you've got to decide if the house is not going to remain, and the market decided that it wouldn't, what are we going to have there to encourage the best single-family residential that you can to preserve and protect the neighborhood that's there? And this plan is, in my view, as good as Griffin is going to see, in candor. I don't want to see the house gone. The market did not protect the house. So how do we then redevelop in a way that protects the integrity of the neighborhood? And that requires redevelopment as a single-family dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway.
Thank you.
Mr. Whalen, do we need to let all in favor speak first, or what is staff's recommendation? Does staff want to read all the responses at this time first, and then, okay, so at this time, Assistant City Manager Jesse O'Connor is going to read all the information that was emailed in to the city. So,
Okay, so a couple of disclaimers before we get started. First, I apologize because this is going to be long because we have a lot of them. Secondly, these are opinions that are addressed by the people that have sent this in, not by staff, not by me as reading them, just who wrote them. If you are here and want to speak instead of me reading for you, please let me know before I begin, because you will not be given two opportunities. So if you've submitted a written comment and would rather do it in person, I will call the name. Please tell me that you'd rather do that, and we will go from there. If I have an address, I will certainly list that, but I mainly just have names. And I apologize for sitting down. I'm not meaning to be disrespectful. It's just going to be a handful after a while. Okay. Janet Sawicki, and I also apologize if I mispronounce your name. Okay. I'm opposed to the rezoning of 670 South Hill Street or any form of compromise to the number of houses that can be built on this property. The property is currently zoned for 8 houses. I was born and raised in Griffin and have lived in the South Side neighborhood for several years. Increasing the number of houses will increase the density, and the property values of the homes in this neighborhood will decrease. There is already a precedence of what will happen with a subdivision in this neighborhood. If you will observe the subdivisions off of Crescent Road on the other end of Woodland Drive, you will see the outcome of just this very thing. Spec homes that are not quality, not well kept, and the yards are unsightly. Also, this subdivision has affected the quality of surrounding businesses, including the main grocery store on the south side, which is located adjacent to this subdivision off of Crescent. Mr. Toland has already called the people of our community myopic. Mr. Toland is only concerned with his profit and not our great community of Griffin. Such efforts have been made for the beautification of Griffin, Georgia. Let's keep Griffin beautiful. Commissioners, please hear the members of this community who have voted for you in the last election and vote no to the rezoning of Camellia Hill. Sincerely, Janet Sawicki. I will try. Jacob Redding. Is Mr. Redding here? Okay. Dear City Commissioners, let this email serve as my voice of opposition to the planned rezoning of Camellia Hill. As someone who lives adjacent to this street, I am well aware of the issues with traffic and parking that already exist. Aside from greed, the developers have offered no real reason as to why they can't build a reasonably priced and profitable 8-house subdivision. The disruption to our quality of life in this neighborhood will probably last for at least 5 to 10 years before they even finish construction. And what happens when they can't sell these houses at the insane prices of $350,000 to over $400,000? We end up with another trash subdivision. Some of you here who are voting tonight live in this neighborhood. Is this what you want to see happen? Do you stand to gain something from it? Those who don't live in this neighborhood, is this what you want to see happen where you live? If any of you actually care about this city, you'd vote against this. I hope that you do care, and will show that with your vote tonight. Sincerely, Jacob Redding, 727 Clay Street. Mia Brandon. To the Commissioners, please do not vote in favor of this rezoning of Camellia Hill. Nothing presented by the developers indicated that this would be anything other than detrimental to our neighborhood. As was already enumerated at the Planning and Zoning meeting, the developers have put little thought into this and seem to think this was already a done deal for them, which begs the question, who made that deal with them, or let them think they could get past the zoning as is when they purchased the property. As elected officials, your duty is to your constituents, not any developer that wants to come in and destroy the integrity of our traditional neighborhood as outlined in the City of Griffin's comprehensive plan in 2018. Do what's right for your citizens and vote no against this rezoning measure. Thank you, Mia Brandon, 302 Tilney Avenue. Amanda Sprayberry? Okay. Rick Kurtzman? To our esteemed city commissioners, so far the citizens of Griffin have been called ignorant, uninformed, emotional, and myopic because we have come forward to defend the current city zoning of this parcel of land. The first 3 comments were made by city staff, the latter by the developer. To my knowledge, no private citizen in my group has made any derogatory comment about any party involved. We have been working within the outline system to make our voice heard. Unfortunately, the developer has made threats verbally in front of many citizens. I will clear cut the lot, I will develop it commercially, I will cut 4 driveways onto Milner, etc. City staff keeps suggesting a compromise of 12 houses instead of 15. How is this a compromise? In a compromise, both sides should give something. The City of Griffin is giving up our current zoning. What is the developer giving? Nothing except a promise to scale down to 12 houses from his original ask of 15. Current zoning says 8 houses. How would this 12 be enforced? Basically, to my understanding, it can't be enforced. Once this zoning has been changed, if something were to happen to this project, which is likely given the proposed asking sales price per square foot of these properties, the project would revert to the MDR zoning requirements of 1,500 square foot houses on smaller lots. According to the developer and what was mentioned in last week's zoning board meeting, there are too many unknowns with this project to make an informed decision. Covenants, adequate parking, how it will affect traffic, where will the retention pond be located? How will the property be graded? It's very hilly. What type vegetation and trees will be saved? What will the buffer on Hill Street look like? And more. Once this piece of property goes from its current zoning of low-density residential B to medium-density residential, this will open the floodgates for other developers to apply for rezoning all up and down Hill Street to Sun City for these type developments. On South Hill, this is basically one of a few tracts that would afford this type of non-conforming development, but on North Hill, there are many such properties. As Henry County fills up and people keep moving south, I would hate to see these cul-de-sac developments pop up all the way to Sun City. I would ask the developer and his attorney to help me understand how this is not spot zoning. In looking at the map, there is nothing contiguous to the property zoned MDR. MDR is supposed to be a buffer to high density. Where is the closest high density zoning? The closest zoning change that I see as a layperson are the apartments, commercially zoned PCD, on the diagonal corner across a highway. I realize the address is technically South Hill Street, but for all practical purposes, this rezoning affects Milner Avenue. Mr. Galloway has brought up Emery Drive as contiguous and a similar development. Those houses are smaller and built on smaller lots, but were built prior to our current zoning of 1,800 square feet homes on half-acre lots was in place. How can we go back in time to bring this matter in play now as a reason to justify this rezoning? If we look at social media, less than 2% of the comments have been in favor of this project. The main proponents of the project, the real estate company that sold the property, developer, his attorney, and the city staff. If we look at support to keep the zoning intact, there are over 600 citizens who have signed a petition in support to keep current zoning. To put this in perspective, in the last city election, roughly 3,000 voted. I am so proud this many of our citizens actually care about our community and its future. Mr. Galloway, the developer's attorney, keeps suggesting the public outcry is in response to the old house being torn down and that it's outlived its usefulness as a single-family dwelling. Since, per the developer, they put the property under contract during the first week of the listing and they basically paid the asking price, we'll never know. I do know people have moved to Griffin for the beautiful architecture and have restored some of Griffin's old homes. Kenneth Moore, Kirby, Ron, and Anita, and myself are prime examples. None of us are against development. The 600-plus signatures are against a development that steps outside of the current zoning. Although I hate to see the house destroyed, I support Mr. Tolan's right to develop this tract of land within the current guidelines of 8 houses and fully understand he intends to tear down the house. Due to all of these considerations, I humbly ask that you, our elected officials, please deny this request for rezoning, and please do not consider the 12-house compromise recommended by the city staff. Thank you all for your service and your time. Rick Kurtzman, 434 East College Street. Kendall Jones. Michael Colquitt. Dear Commissioners, I'd like to write in my opposition to the proposed rezoning of Camellia Hill. As I am a close neighbor to this property, I will be directly affected by this proposed development project. Not only will the destruction and construction cause noise disruptions to the neighborhood for the next several years, but once it is finished, if it's ever finished, I'll be further disrupted by increased traffic, parking issues, and not to mention our power grid that gets overwhelmed in a strong wind. The reality is that the $350,000 to $400,000 price tags on these homes is completely unattainable in Griffin. This developer has similar projects in Atlanta that barely break $300,000, so it's completely delusional to think you'll get anything close to that here. Our elected officials and city workers should very seriously consider whose best interest they are concerned with here. An outside developer who thinks we're all short-sighted, or the citizens you were elected and or hired to serve. Again, please listen to your citizens and vote no against this proposed rezoning. Michael Colquitt, 725 Woodland Drive. Kristen Dutton. This is addressed to members of the P&Z Board. I will keep this email short and succinct because I hope that you will respect my opinion just as I respect your time. Although unable to attend tonight's meeting, I hope my words will properly convey the alarm I feel about the possible rezoning of Camellia Hill. Although not originally from Griffin, I have made this beautiful city my home. My husband and I are both business owners who intentionally chose to set down roots and raise our family in Doc Holliday's hometown. We are deeply committed to this community and actively volunteer and invest our time and talents to better our beloved town. We even grow irises in our yard. I say all this to lend weight to my words, especially when compared to words from those who are not from this city. Do not actively engage on a daily basis with this city and have predominantly monetary aims. In my opinion, the draw of Griffin lies in its history. This history is what brings charm to our small southern town. We should be working to preserve and protect those things which make us great. With this in mind, please note that I am strongly opposed to any type of rezoning that would increase the density of this property beyond what it is currently zoned. I wholeheartedly support those who have organized to oppose the rezoning of Camellia Hill and lend my voice to join theirs. Please do not allow this rezoning. Please listen to the citizens of Griffin. Sincerely, Kristen Dutton of Dutton Kavanaugh at 409 Airport Road. James Deloy. Good afternoon. I want to make sure I have the chance to say I am very opposed to the rezoning of the Camellia Hill property. Unless you plan to start making special exceptions for every developer that comes into town, I'd think you wouldn't want to start now with Lance Toland and his 1317 Demir LLC. While he may have a deal with the city on airport insurance, that shouldn't mean he gets special treatment when he wants to double the amount of houses currently allowed in low-density areas. As elected officials, I hope you'll think twice about voting in his favor and look to the voters who put you in the positions you now hold. While I may not live in this particular neighborhood, I don't want to see this type of development here or in my part of the city, and I would imagine most of you wouldn't want to see anything similar in your own backyards. Best, James Deloy, 1219 High Falls Road. Ashley Appleman. Dear City Commissioners, this email is to inform you of my opposition to the proposed rezoning of Camellia Hill. As a citizen of Griffin, I am concerned that this will set a bad precedence for the surrounding neighborhoods and districts beyond that of the property in question. With issues of traffic and parking already prevalent on this street, the subdivision will only serve to compound the issues. What's to stop other developers from doing similar projects in other parts of the city at the detriment to the surrounding homes? Considering the developers have been openly bullying and threatening our city if they don't get their way, it would make absolutely no sense for the city to try to compromise with them. Our taxpayer money that fund city workers and our votes that put our elected officials in place should not be misappropriated to best suit the whims of a millionaire developer with a string of unfinished developments throughout the state. I ask that you vote no to this proposed rezoning and do what is best and right for our city. Sincerely, Ashley Appleman, 1887 Green Valley Road. Mac Isaacs. I'm opposed to the current rezoning request at Camellia Hill. I believe if we continue to add high-density housing in this area, we will cause problems for Crescent School, which is already beyond capacity. Mary Bay Flanagan. To the City of Griffin Commissioners, I ask that you please vote no against rezoning Camellia Hill. While I want to recognize the loss of one of Griffin's last remaining historic homes, I do understand that it is well within the rights of the new owners to do with as they choose, within the current zoning measures. At the Planning and Zoning meeting last week, they made it clear that they had done little to no research of the area. There was no traffic study, no environmental impact study, and apparently not even a cursory study of the surrounding property values, considering they think houses will sell for over $400,000 in this neighborhood. As a lifelong Griffinite, I hate to see another beautiful home destroyed, but even more, I hate the idea of seeing another unfinished and unsustainable subdivision blight our neighborhood. Griffin has enjoyed revenue from the film industry in increasing amounts, largely due to our charming and historic little city. While you may enjoy a temporary kickback now from allowing this rezoning, the long-term effects of diminishing our small-town charm will continue to be felt for years. I ask that you not be myopic in regards to the future of Griffin and that you listen to the voices of your constituents. Vote no to this rezoning before we end up another cookie-cutter, soulless city devoid of its small-town southern charms. Sincerely, Mary Bay Flanagan, 209 Sylvan Lane. Wes Long. Dear Board of Commissioners, I have lived in Griffin most of my life and am a 20-year homeowner on Milner Avenue. My wife is also a lifelong resident of Griffin, and we've raised both of our children in this home. I have no doubt that when I'm old and gray, I will look back on our times in this home as the greatest years of my life. I have ridden past Camellia Hill every day for the past 20 years. Turning onto Milner Avenue from Hill Street and seeing that house meant I was almost home, and of course that makes me sentimental about the property. It doesn't, however, make me myopic, as Mr. Tolan Jr. has suggested. I'm invested in my neighborhood and my community because it is where I call home. As I stated in my comments during the P&Z meeting, I respect that the property has been purchased and that change is coming to our street and our neighborhood. But as someone who has lived here and put in years and years of work to make my home what it is today, I don't want to see that investment lessened by a development that does not bring value to my neighborhood or my home. Please consider the number of people who have spoken out about this issue. Please acknowledge the number of signatures that have been obtained as a show of unity for the people who actually live in the neighborhood. But ultimately, if neither of those two things are to be considered, please trust the decision of our own Planning and Zoning Board, who have unanimously voted to not recommend changing the current zoning. I thank you for your time to hear my concerns, and I thank you for your service to our city. Wes Long on Milner. Josh Cresswell. Dear City Commissioners, please do not allow this proposed rezoning to pass, not for 15 houses or for the so-called compromise of 12 houses. The developers knew the house was zoned for 8 houses when they bought the property unconditionally. It is not your responsibility to then change the zoning to better suit their monetary gain. As most longtime residents of Griffin can speak to, we've seen time and time again where developers have come in promising big, nice subdivisions to drive revenue for the city and raise property values for the houses around them. Yet time and time again, we've watched them fail to deliver on these promises. It is time to say enough is enough and vote no to prevent another doomed development in our city. Thanks, Josh Cresswell, 727 Clay Street. Nancy Blake. Please vote no in the rezoning coming up at tonight's meeting. It is essential not to set a precedent for plots of residential land that become available in the historic district in the future. Thank you for your no vote, Nancy Blake. Bonnie Moray. Okay. Dear Mayor Holberg and City Commissioners, as the former chair of the Griffin Environmental Council 2019, I would like to provide some thoughts that may not have been considered regarding this rezoning. An MDR construction site of 15 homes in our well-established neighborhood can yield risks to human health and the environment due to pollution. If you live in a home near a construction site, you will face the following types of pollution, which will be doubled if 15 homes are built instead of 8. Noise pollution. Noise adversely affects your health. It increases stress, causes sleep disturbance, which can lead to high blood pressure and can cause hearing loss. Air pollution. Apart from the noise, poor air quality is the most immediate pollution effect you will experience from a construction site. This means that airborne contaminants, including contaminated particulate matter and volatile compounds, are spreading around, mostly carried by wind, in the surrounding neighborhood. The main wind direction will influence the area most affected by air pollution around a construction site. Contaminants spreading around in air can travel large distances in a short time. The main construction contaminants that spread around by wind include PM10, particulate matter with a diameter less than 10 microns generating polluted dust, PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons bound to particulate matter, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, asbestos, gases such as carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. Water pollution. As described for air pollution above, the following construction contaminants can pollute the water: VOCs, paints, glues, diesel, oils, other toxic chemicals, and cement. Liquid contaminants can migrate through the soil matrix and leach into groundwater, while solid and semi-solid pollutants may be transported and dispersed through runoff. In fact, both groundwaters below your home and surface runoff close to your home may constitute a source of pollution emanating from the construction sites. Additionally, once the groundwater below your home becomes contaminated, it may affect the quality of your indoor air. Vapor intrusion of the volatile contaminants from water. Overall, water pollution from construction sites is underestimated and has potential to generate severe environmental problems and health issues. Soil pollution. Soil at and around a construction site may become contaminated due to air transport followed by deposition of construction contaminants, listed at air pollution, as well as water runoff of construction contaminants, as listed for water pollution. Soil may constitute a sink for pollutants, and some of those may accumulate in soil and persist over longer periods of time, for example, the PAHs. As you can see, constructing 15 homes instead of the current zoning of 8 at Camellia Hill just about doubles the pollution mentioned above. Quality of life is paramount. However, quality of life will be diminished by rezoning from Ldrb to MDR. Please vote no. Thank you for your time and consideration. Respectfully, Bonnie Moray. Justin Tyndall. Dear City Commissioners, I am writing to let you know that I do not want to see Camellia Hill rezoned for a 12 or 15 house subdivision. The City of Griffin put zoning measures in place for a reason, and it makes no sense to change it arbitrarily for a developer who has already shown he does not have our city's best interest at heart. 1317 Demure LLC bought the Camellia Hill property with the full knowledge that it was only zoned for 8 homes. To acquiesce to their threats and demands for rezoning would call into question the intentions and involvement of our city workers and commissioners. Please vote no on this proposed rezoning. Sincerely, Justin Tyndall, 860 East College Street. Stephen Colquitt. Dear City Commissioners, I'm writing to you to voice my opposition to the proposed rezoning of Camellia Hill. I live on Woodland and am gravely concerned about the impact this will have on our neighborhood. The addition of a 15-house subdivision will affect the character of our neighborhood, increase the flow of traffic, and create additional parking problems on Milner Avenue. Considering the number of unfinished subdivisions within a 1-mile radius, it seems absurd to assume we need any more, particularly in our low-density neighborhood. I am concerned that our elected officials and city workers are working so hard to compromise with a developer who appears to have no regards for our city or neighborhood. It certainly raises concerns about the vested interest of those involved in this deal. I'd also like to note that you are entering a dangerous precedence if you make a special rezoning allowance for this developer. I implore you to listen to your citizens and constituents and vote no against this proposed rezoning. Sincerely, Stephen Colquitt, 725 Woodland Drive. Skipper Burns. Dear Commissioners, please vote tonight to support the vote of the Zoning Commission. Please vote to deny any change in the current zoning. Thank you for reading my email, and now you know my opinion. Kind regards, Skipper Burns. James Dunaway. Please deny the zoning change for the Camellia Hill property. Thanks, Jim Dunaway. Anna Burns. Dear city officials, I urge you all to follow the lead of your Planning and Zoning Board and its recommendation to deny the rezoning of Camellia Hill, the property at the intersection of Milner Avenue and South Hill Street. Thank you so much, Anna Burns, 403 East College Street. Helen Grayson. I urge you to please not allow the additional homes requested on the Camellia Hill property. It is shameful that the property was zoned to be divided into 8 lots, but to add more is simply unthinkable. With all the beauty going on in the downtown area, it makes no sense to destroy a lovely residential area. Thank you for your consideration. Lisa Spears. Dear Commissioners of Griffin, my name is Lisa Spears and I live at 202 Sylvan Lane in Griffin. I have lived here 13 years as of 8/17/20. I chose to buy my house here because it was a peaceful neighborhood with friendly people and I truly enjoyed the historic architecture of Griffin. Also, I found that I could do a lot of walking for exercise because the minimal traffic would enable me to walk even with my dogs. I appreciate the historical homes in our community and do not want to see it changed, nor do I want to see the traffic increase, which would make it more dangerous for me because I have balance problems and other issues since being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2002. Please do not allow the developer who purchased the historical home at 670 South Hill Street to destroy our wonderful, historic, and safe community. With respect and gratitude, Lisa Spears. Bill and Carol Bowen. It is regrettable that Camellia Hill was not protected historically from destruction and will become yet another historical casualty of the wrecking ball in Griffin. Beyond that tragedy, I respectfully request that rezoning to increase the density be denied. There was a reason for the zoning in the first place, and there is no good reason to change it now. Please vote no to this rezoning. Sincerely, Bill and Carol Bowen, 920 Maple Drive. David Castile? Go ahead. First of all, I wish to make it abundantly clear that this email comes from me as a citizen of Griffin and not from my position on the Griffin Zoning Board. In no way is anything I have to say here to be construed as coming from info not available as public record to any citizen. My request to the City Commissioners is that you deny the request for a rezone from Ldrb to MDR for the property known as Camellia Hill, designated as located at 670 South Hill Street. MDR is described in the Unified Development Code as a buffering transitional zone to place between low and high density residential zones. Such a function is certainly not the case here, but rather it is spot zoning, which we all know isn't allowed. The presentation to the PZB at its public hearing, accessible online, was woefully inadequate and even at some points incorrect. The Walker Hill property across Milner Avenue isn't all zoned NDR as depicted on the slide shown by the applicant's attorney, but rather 3 acres LDRB and 7 acres NDR. There was no map of the proposed division of the 4.286 acre plot into 15 lots shown, no access road to these lots shown, no retention pond, no rights of way, etc. There was no info as to access road width and whether or not it could accommodate emergency vehicles and on-street parking. All that was presented was they wanted 15 lots and wanted to tear down the present historical home located there now. There were statements as to the number of houses with square footage varying from 1,800 to 2,200. Elevation drawings of the proposed houses were shown, and I can't claim to have the sense of architectural aesthetics to be able to comment on that aspect of the proposal. But I can claim to have knowledge to what can happen when so many conditions in a rezoning proposal are placed in the rezoning that aren't part of the code itself's minimum requirements. Evidence of these results can be seen in places all around the city, such as Waterford on Ellis, second section of Coldwater Creek, and the multifamily structure known as the Treadway development. All it takes is some legal maneuvers in bankruptcy court and a sale during bankruptcy, and all conditions over and above minimum requirements can be abrogated. Then we could find 1,500 square foot houses and minimum grade construction materials used, all in a once beautifully wooded spot now leveled and stripped to bare earth. This development further would disrupt the harmony and peace of a well-established and stable neighborhood, increase noise, air pollution, and traffic on narrow streets. Wildlife habitat would be destroyed and a beautiful and historic home destroyed, all for what could become a blot of tract homes of barely minimum requirements for MDR. The most favored use of this property by the residents surrounding Camellia Hill would of course be renovation of the historic home and surrounding grounds. This has been done previously to other historic and traditional homes in the area. But if this isn't possible or feasible, then the property should be developed within the bounds, limitations, and spirit of its present zoning, LDRB, and its compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood maintained. Thank you, David Castile. Sunny Brooks. It is my hope that this will get a vote of no. I am a property owner on South Hill Street and do not want to see a subdivision on this historic street. I am completely against this rezoning effort. Thanks. Ann Childress. I am Ann Hendricks Childress of 102 Ldrb in Griffin. I retired young after 25 years of teaching as school librarian, and I have a small business in Griffin. I've resided in Griffin since 1970, and I grew up down the road from Camellia Hill on 310 Crescent Road. My parents are the retired teachers named Dr. John and Patsy Hendricks. I speak for them too in this letter. My parents knew both owners of Camellia Hill, and I visited there as a girl several times. It is a historically beautiful home and important to keep preserved as part of the beauty of Southside Griffin. Walker Hill, another beautiful home and on the National Register, is across the street. It would be a historical travesty to ruin such a beautiful home. My favorite memory of the hill is running my German Shepherd from Milner to the red light and turning right and running past Camellia Hill each day. I was in my 20s and remember thinking how lovely the home was and how I wished I could live in such beauty. It truly is a beautiful grounds and home. Griffin has a lovely heritage, and this home is part of it. Please don't rezone and build houses there. My parents, just 2 blocks away, purchased their own property in 1982 and had no idea that my childhood home would end up with houses up and down Crescent Road. The traffic was already bad on Crescent Road in the mid-1980s, but it got worse as the development came. In fact, we fought the building of the condos as was proposed in the late 1980s. In the 1990s and the turn of the century, housing began, stopped, and began again. My childhood woods now consist of Food Depot, several rental homes, several homes that are owned, and the habitat was forever changed for the deer and animals that live down there. I'd hate to see that happen to Camellia Hill. I speak from someone that spent my youth down the road, and also for my parents that are property owners still on Crescent. Thank you. Save the hill. Katie Inglis. I feel quite confident, this is Dear Mr. McCord, this was not sent to commission comments, but it was forwarded to staff. So Dear Mr. McCord, I feel quite confident your mailbox is very full due to the recent issues involving the Camellia Hill property. With that said, I do believe the matter of Camellia Hill is a result of years and years of our community leaders neglecting the historical significance of our homes and buildings, present company excluded. Shame on me for not realizing the impact of this destruction and stepping up sooner. My greatest fear is that this will only open Pandora's box, if you will, for irresponsible preservation and conservation throughout our city. I urge you, as well as other members of the City Commission, to stop the 12 to 15 homes to be built within the area. Let us all work together for a compromise. While there is vitriol, anger, and utter ridiculousness floating about, I urge you to be our voice of reason. Set the example for communities across our state on how we can join forces and create living spaces everyone can benefit from, not just a few. Please take the advice of our zoning board. Most kindly, Katie Mouche Inglis. Stacy Chestnut. This is another one that was submitted to Commissioner McCord and forwarded to staff. Dear Mr. McCord, I am a citizen of Griffin, and I would like to let you know I'm against the rezoning of Camellia Hill. I believe the owners are out to only make a profit and do not have our city in their best interest. They will not live here and raise their children here. Why should we let them dictate what happens in our hometown? Please vote against rezoning. Thank you for your continued leadership. Stacy Chestnut. Ron Hoffman. Okay. Ms. Anita Hoffman. She want to speak, or you want me to read? You want me to read this? Okay. I'm Anita Walker Hoffman. We met on July 31st, and this is to Mr. Chad Jacobs, I'm sorry. We met on July 31st, 2020 to discuss the property on 670 South Hill Street. You have mentioned that we could send our concerns to you, so I waited to put down on paper my thoughts on the matter. This whole area south of Griffin, including South Hill and Milner, has a rich history that goes all the way back to when the town was incorporated. Milner Street was cut in the late 1800s. My grandfather bought the land and house south of Milner Avenue after Ben Milner died in 1905. Our land began on the south side of Milner Avenue and extended all the way to the now Hillendale subdivision. After my grandfather died, my dad moved into the 708 house with my grandmother and decided to develop some of the land. He researched the land by ear and eventually cut Woodland Drive. Here's an aerial view of the property. There are some pictures in here as well that I can give to you, Mayor Holberg, to put in the record. In the photo, you can see the Mills house across Milner Avenue. Below, you see a photo of my grandmother in the yard with the Mills house in the background. In my research, I found that the Mills family built the house on that property, which is 670 South Hill, around 1930 for Elizabeth Hill Bailey. It was designed by an architect from Nashville, Tennessee. There was a smaller house on the property that was moved on logs down the hill to 6th Street so the new elegant house could be built. After Mrs. Bailey's death, the house was bought back into the Mills family. It stayed in the Mills family for over 60 years. Some trees and vegetation are over 100 years old. Mr. Mills propagated camellias during his lifetime on the property. That is why it is called Camellia Hill. I'm also enclosing the real estate description of the property. After reading the description, it certainly does not sound like this house should be demolished. I am also enclosing a photo of pristine land in Fayetteville that has been ripped apart for development. This is what the Mills property will look like if we can't stop the process. In conclusion, I wanted to show you other historic structures Griffin has seen lost over the years due to progress. Number 1 is the Griffin Female College, number 2 is the R.T. Daniel House, and number 3 is First Presbyterian Church. So these are my thoughts. I hope you will agree with me that it is important to preserve and keep Griffin history for future generations. Thank you. Sincerely, Anita W. Hoffman, homeowner. We'll make sure to put these in the minutes. Joyce Darden. I'm opposed to the rezoning of the property at 670 South Hill Street and building 12 to 15 homes on this property, which is at the corner of South Hill Street and Milner Avenue. I am also opposed to the tearing down of the beautiful 84-year-old historic home on this 4-acre property. All of the homes on Milner Avenue, South Hill Street, and the surrounding area are at least 50 years old, and some are as old as 1867. Most of the homes are unique, charming, and beautifully designed. All are on at least 1/2 acre of land, which further enhances their beauty and uniqueness. This is the reason I purchased a home in this area. If possible, this beautiful home at 670 South Hill Street should be restored. It is certainly a one-of-a-kind home with its huge pillars gracing the front of the home. Camellias had at one time surrounded it, thus giving it a name, Camellia Hill. Placing 12 to 15 homes on this property will significantly detract from the beauty and charm of the area. It is important that the city preserve this historic area for its uniqueness, charm, and gracefulness. If this property is rezoned, allowing properties on 1/4 acre to be built, it sets a precedent for other developers to come into the neighborhood and do the same. It will ruin the character of the neighborhood. The proposed rezoning and subsequent development will likely lead to decreased property values of surrounding homes. The significant increase in homes from the proposed development will lead to increased traffic, congestion, safety issues, and noise in the surrounding area. The significant increase in homes in the area will decrease the natural habitat of wildlife in the area, and the loss of vegetation will increase air pollution as well. 99% of the people living in the neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods whom I have petitioned concerning the tearing down of the home and rezoning the plot on 670 South Hill Street are opposed to it for the above reasons. I respectfully request that the commissioners carefully consider the negative impact that such rezoning will have on this area and the city of Griffin. Joyce C. Darden, 708 Woodland Drive. D. Eubanks. To all concerned, I am unable to attend in person due to work constraints as well as concern over social distancing guidelines in and outside the meeting room. As a longtime resident of Griffin with deep ties to and love for our community, I would like to express that I am against rezoning of the property on Milner Avenue. Growth is necessary but must be thoughtful and with careful consideration to our future. I do not believe that the proposed rezoning changes will benefit our community in any way and in fact may be hurtful in the long run. You will hear from many speakers tonight that will speak for both sides of the issues. I ask each of you on the zoning committee as well as the city commissioners to ask yourself what is best for all of us, not just a select few. Dorothy D. Eubanks, 716 Woodland Drive. And I should make note, we did, if there was a comment submitted during the planning and zoning meeting, we did go ahead and we're rereading those now, so they did not have to be resubmitted because that was stated in social media and in other news outlets. So some of these are addressed specifically to planning and zoning but are being reread now. Jan Branham. It has come to my attention that the developer that has purchased the 4 acres that Camellia Hill sits on is hoping to build 15 houses on these 4 acres and also tear down this historic home. What is he thinking of? Certainly only himself and lining his pockets with the profits he will make off of the 15 houses. Do we even know what this development will look like? Hopefully not like the ones across the street from Crescent School. When will Griffin wake up and try and make a real difference in the quality of what comes into our sweet city? At the very least, the Georgia Trust should have been contacted. They might could save this important home. We have lost so many, and our historic history is the one thing that could save this city by promoting it. Hate to see another treasure lost to a developer who could put these same boring houses anywhere else in Griffin so as not to destroy the historic Forest Hills community. This is outrageous. Jan Brannon. Norma Richardson. To whom it may concern, I had hoped to attend the meeting this evening. However, due to the fact that the request to have the meeting moved to a larger location that could accommodate more people safely was denied, I am writing my comments via email. I am opposed to the rezoning of the property located on the corner of South Hill Street and Milner Avenue, Magnolia Hill, 670 South Hill Street. I believe it will have a negative impact on my neighborhood and those surrounding. There are many concerns, but some include an increase in traffic, clear-cutting the property for construction, and detracting from the character of the neighborhood. In addition, during the construction phases that will take quite some time, there will be disruption in our neighborhood. One of the beauties of our neighborhood is how quiet it is. That would be definitely end. I am a homeowner and resident at 707 Woodland Drive. I grew up in the house, and when I decided to move back to Griffin in the early 2000s, I moved back in the house. I am also a downtown business and property owner. I ask you to consider the concerns and wishes of those who are directly affected by this proposed action. Thank you. Anissa Curtis, 138 Milner Avenue. Dear Zoning Commission and City Commission, the proposed rezoning would directly impact me and the value of my new home, and I write to oppose the proposed rezoning for the reasons outlined below. I am new to Milner Avenue. I closed on my home in June at what I considered to be a fair price to be a resident of a beautiful historic neighborhood. At the time that I chose my home, I had no idea that a developer would seek to raise a historic home and put a high-density development off of what I considered to be a quiet residential street. I never intended to live in a crowded subdivision and could not have imagined that 15 homes on quarter-acre lots would be in my neighborhood. I'm approximately 2 months into a mortgage at the value of the home I purchased, which will likely drop even if the Camellia Hill property is developed consistent with current zoning. But if the area is zoned for 15 houses on 4 acres, it will drop even more significantly. Had I known what was coming, I would never have purchased my home. Part of my expectations in choosing my home was that traffic was light, even considering that Milner is a cut-through between East College and Maple Drive. My extended family has small children who visit me, and I fear for the increased traffic that will come with the development and for the safety of my family. Those who have purchased property in and around Maple Drive and East College did so at a price and with the expectation of being in a beautiful historic neighborhood in the city of Griffin. A single group of developers should not be allowed to profit at the expense of all of the other homeowners in the neighborhood. All of us who have sacrificed to own a home in the neighborhood have taken pride in our residence, and now we are finding out that the neighborhood in which we may one day wake up is not the one we dreamed of. I respectfully request that the change in zoning be denied. Jim and Tessa Watson. We are against rezoning of this property. Crowding too many small houses on this property would lessen the quality of life in this neighborhood. As longtime residents of South Hill Street, just a block away from this property, we are aware of how much traffic has increased in the last 40 years. Truly saddened to see this property destroyed, but we are more concerned with the increase of traffic flow that will be added to the neighborhood. Jim and Tessa Watson, 619 South Hill Street. Vicki and Ken Bozeman. Dear Commissioners, please consider our request to keep the zoning as is for Camellia Hill. We all realize that the buyer has every right to do as he pleases with his purchase. We cannot tell him what to do with something he purchased. We can, however, as a community, stop the rezoning request for this land. Please ensure the quietness and calmness of our neighborhood and keep the zoning the way it is at this time. We know that the home is going to be torn down. That is hard to see, but it is going to happen. As our elected commissioners, we hope that you will consider these many requests to stop the rezoning of this property. It is zoned for no more than 8 homes on half-acre lots. Please do not approve a substandard subdivision and make us lose the small-town atmosphere that is an attraction to people who choose to move here. Thank you for your time, and we are in hopes that you will all do the right thing for Griffin. Vicki and Ken Bozeman, Pine Ridge Road. James Campbell. Vote no on rezoning the property at South Hill and Milner to higher density. James H. Campbell, 838 Hanover Drive. Isaac Milton. I've got a few concerns about the rezoning of Camellia Hill to allow for smaller houses on smaller lots. There are already several subdivisions close to the neighborhood with larger, less expensive houses than the developer is planning that are having trouble selling. like Coldwater Creek and Crescent Lane. In addition, there are multiple townhouses like those off of South Hill Street and off of Grandview that are not at capacity. If the developer purchased the house with the understanding that the existing historic structure can be torn down and the lot can be subdivided into 8 houses/lots, then I don't know that anything can be done to stop that from happening. But seeking to double the number of houses on that small of a property is unacceptable and could set a precedence for other ill-conceived developments in the neighborhood. I don't understand, based on the comps, why the developer thinks that they will be able to sell 1,400 square foot houses for excess of $300,000 in a neighborhood where houses twice that size sell for the mid-200s. I think that we're going to have to deal with a bunch of small, unsold houses driving down property values in the neighborhood, and that is not in the city's best interest, especially when a large portion of the tax base lives nearby. Also, if there are members or relatives of the city council/zoning board who would financially benefit from this subdivision, then I think that they need to consider recusing themselves from the proceedings. Concerned property owner Isaac Milton, North Brookwood. John William Baldwin. Please maintain the current zoning requirements. There are other high-density areas in the neighborhood. Quality, not quantity. Thank you. Bill and Louise Baldwin on Hilltop. Louisa Melton. The city of Griffin is presently spending a great deal of grant money on the downtown beautification project, which makes it obvious that the beauty and history of the old historic area is of great value to Griffin. The area for which the rezoning is requested is in the center of this area between South Hill and Maple Drive. The impact of the requested rezoning would show a total disregard for preservation of this district. The beauty of our historic homes and areas has long been one of our strong points. I ask those whose decision this is to make to continue to support our historic value in Griffin. It is far more valuable than any subdivision to our community. Louisa Melton. Emily Tingle. As native Griffinites and current homeowners in the Forest Hill area, we are very concerned about the plans to demolish another historical home in our city. Even more concerning is the plan to rezone and build multiple houses on this 4-acre parcel. Per our research, we believe the original zoning is for one residence on a 4-acre lot. The purpose of the zoning is to preserve a particular neighborhood to protect the homeowners and prospective buyers to assure them it would remain that way. A recent count of homes for sale in the 3rd Ward Crescent area under 200,000 is around 20, with 10 more under 300,000. There are multiple homes under construction in the Crescent area on County Line and in the Coldwater Creek subdivision. There doesn't seem to be a housing shortage in the area. The parcel of land in question is 4 acres. How will it conceivably have up to 15 houses with paving and parking built? How will the city provide the necessary utilities? Also of concern is the aging infrastructure. Is the current sewage system able to handle that many houses in an area meant for one? At present, when Crescent School is in session, the heavy traffic from Crescent is diverted to Milner Avenue. The traffic congestion on Milner Avenue will be a problem. At the very least, cutting down the beautiful old oaks and leveling another beautiful historical home in the city is a travesty. Griffin has been our home for over 60 years. Griffin's long-beloved neighborhood of Forest Hills will lose its beauty and character if we continue down this path. We in this neighborhood all bought our homes in confidence that it would remain a low-density residential area. We ask you to seriously consider not changing the zoning for this property and our neighborhood. There is so much to consider other than a few who may profit from this poor decision. Sincerely, Douglas R. Tingle, Emily M. Tingle, 1051 Pine Valley Road. Jeff Hoffman. I'm adamantly opposed to the rezoning request for the Camellia Hill house on the corner of South Hill and Milner. The houses will not fit with the quaintness and look of the neighborhood. This was the main reason we chose to move here a year ago. There are empty lots sitting on Crescent and Woodland that have been empty for way too long. Why would we want another developer to start something that would drop our property values and potentially never get finished like the other neighborhoods less than a half a mile from this proposed site? The Camellia Hill house is in need of work, but beautiful nonetheless. Please vote no to the zoning request. Thank you, Jeff and Jennifer Hoffman, 721 Woodland Drive. Kenneth Moore and Drew Payne.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. Do we know if we have any statements or anything that's come in on the internet or?
They weren't allowed to submit by
Okay, so
Zoom.
that's
Comments
all
are
clear.
turned off.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. If we can take a 3-minute break so people can run to the bathroom, and then we'll come right back. So right now, I'm showing 7:33, so if we go to 7:37, we'll get right back to speech. So stretch your legs for a second, and we'll be right back. All right, thank you, everybody, for your patience. All right, so we're going to begin. So are there, in terms of the group that's against, is there certain speakers that have a presentation they'd like to make? Start off? Yes, sir. If you'll please come before the commission, state your name and address for the record, please. Good evening, Kirby.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I know that some folks have had trouble with the sound in the back. Kirby Sisk, I live at 132 East College Street, born in Griffin. I moved back here about 6 years ago. Excuse me. I prepared a PowerPoint, but I was told I couldn't present it here live, so I'm going to hand out printed copies if that's okay. I apologize to the room because you guys won't be able to see this.
Yes, very cold in here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks again for your time, for us to, an opportunity to come speak about this issue. First, let me preface again my comments here. I'm representing quite a number of longtime Griffin residents who feel this is impacting their property values and their quality of life in a negative way. We are not espousing any position here that says that a private homeowner has to change anything they can need to do based on the existing zoning and the existing laws that dictate what they can do on that property. So most of the people that I've spoken with, and some you've heard here also, would like to keep the house and grounds, but we're also aware that it's been sold, it's on Ldrb zoning, and that allows for the house to be torn down and something else to be built in its place. First slide in this is an excerpt from the, put on my glasses, from the comprehensive plan, and specific pieces in here talk about protecting natural resources, embracing history, preservation of historic resources and neighborhoods, neighborhood parks, high quality of life, and those sorts of things. So I would urge that our city commissioners do what you say you're going to do as you consider this proposal. Second one, we have 612 signatures from citizens and neighbors in opposition to making this zoning change. That's an unprecedented number of people to turn out against a motion like this. And again, as I said earlier, there's 3,000 people that voted in the last election. The next slide is a correct Griffin land use map that specifies this property as Ldrb. It is residential, but there's multiple versions of that. It is classic spot zoning. There's a definition of spot zoning on this page. It is residential, but when you get down to the brass tacks of this is an Ldrb zone, period. And everything else around that is Ldrb. And to zone it anything else is spot zoning, creates an island that is nowhere near this existing property. Addressing also the properties that are not next to it, but nearby, that are quarter acre and third acre lots, those were in place long before the current zoning was put in place. The zoning was put in place to protect against that very thing, which is what we're trying to go back against here with this zoning change. The next slide highlights several Griffin lost private homes. We've gone through some of those. There's been numerous over the years that we've lost to progress and various other reasons. We need to be stewards of Griffin and not just focused on short-term profitability and short-term tax revenues. Next slide is public buildings we've lost, from Presbyterian Church to this building that we're standing in today and others. Again, we need to be better stewards of Griffin's culture and character. The next slide is very important. There was a point brought up in the planning and zoning meeting that no one wants to move to Griffin to restore an old home. Well, there's 9 on this page that have been restored. And there's probably another 9 we can come up with as well if you'd like to see that list. This page also calls out their addresses, the sale price value that we could determine, and the square footage. When you average these 9 homes, and they're all 4,000, 5,000 square foot homes, none of them sold over about $430 is the sale price for those large homes on those tracts of land. If you average this, it comes to about $85 a square foot is the value of sale price of those homes. Nowhere near the $200+ per square foot that the developer is proposing he can get for an 1,800 square foot house. The next couple of slides talk to notable Griffin subdivision failures. We've talked about Coldwater Creek, Crescent Village, the Waterford, villas on South Sixth, Kingston, and Shoal Creek out near the country club. These were homes that started out with rose-colored glasses, much as the one we are here. We're being told that there's great resale potential in these homes in this development. That drives an extremely positive business case and skews decision-making towards the positive. I submit to you that happened with all of these developments in the beginning. Somehow through time, that changed drastically. They changed ownership, some of them changed economic conditions, and we're now stuck with subdivisions with a number of larger unsold lots. Some lots were sold under foreclosure, and these are not subdivision developments that we need to repeat, and we're about to do that right here today with the decision that's before us. And that's the final slide I'll comment on. There will be some other folks that'll stand up and talk about some of these other slides. But in closing, I'll state that, again, we're not trying to tell a private homeowner what they can do on their property within the limits of the laws and zoning. We're perfectly happy with them tearing the house down and building up to eight houses on this property. That's what it's zoned for, and it's zoned that way to protect us from overly dense developments that drive down everyone's property values and impact our quality of life. With that, I'm finished. Thank you.
The next speaker. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Holberg. My name is Kenneth Moore, a lifelong resident of Griffin, Georgia. I currently, for the last 5 years, live at 672 Maple Drive, which is where Milner deads into Maple. Prior to that, lived at 541 South 6th Street for 17 years. Therefore, for the past 22 years, my family and I have lived within 1,000 feet of the subject property. I know the neighborhood very well. I'm also a registered architect who has worked in Griffin for the past 25 years. I worked on several projects within the city and in the area. A few recently have won historic renovation awards. So I tend to think that I know design and planning fairly well also. I appreciate Mr. Jacobs mentioning the comprehensive plan. So let me touch on that, a few other things within that plan. First of all, understand that the map on the comprehensive plan is a broad look at uses. They don't delineate between particular residential uses or zoning. It just identifies a large area as residential or commercial or agricultural and so forth. So it's a broad look. Also, if you look at your comprehensive plan, this area has been designated as a traditional neighborhood. It's a character area and traditional neighborhood. Within traditional neighborhood, the development patterns listed in your comprehensive plan. Let me point out a few here. Maintain existing housing stock and preserve neighborhood character. Another item. Protect historic structures and neighborhoods. Another strategy for this area. Designate residential structures districts for the National Register of Historic Places, and consider the adoption of local historic districts. I have recently served on City of Griffin Historic Preservation Commission. Well, recently I have in the past. Crucial on that board of creating the first downtown historic district when we did that. I appreciate the city and looking at the old city hall and what they've done there to a historic structure. That takes a lot of effort, sometimes going against what some people think money should be spent for, but I appreciate what y'all did there. I just wish that you would have the same mindset when you look at your comprehensive plan in other areas and neighborhoods. As an architect, when I have to deal with rezoning, there's a few things you look at. First thing I looked at, let's look at medium-density residential. The intent of medium-density residential, first paragraph under your Unified Development Code states, it shall be the intent of this zoning district to be reserved for development of medium-density residential uses, which is intended to provide a transition between low-density and high-density residential development districts. That's plain and clear. Nowhere on any map that we've seen tonight is any high-density residential district. We've seen several maps tonight, nowhere. We have all low density. This is being proposed for medium density. It's intended to be a transition between low and high. No high exists in the area. I go further. Mr. Jacobs also mentioned the set of standards within your Unified Development Code. Section 405 of the Unified Development Code lists criteria for which the board is to use when determining if a property is to be approved. This is your code. It states that all proposed rezonings of property shall be evaluated in light of the following standards. I'd like to look at a few of these. I won't take time to go through all of them. 405A, the standard, existing uses and zoning of adjacent property. My response, all current adjacent properties are zoned Ldrb and are single-family dwellings. Any change of zoning would be spot zoning and would set a dangerous precedent. 405B, the standard, whether the property to be affected by the zoning proposal has a reasonable economic use as currently zoned. And pay attention to this. Although such use may not be its highest and best potential use. My response, this clearly states that rezoning as a means to increase its best economic potential use should not be done. The property under its current zoning has a reasonable economic use. Any plan to increase the density above its current half-acre zoning should not be considered. The city is not obligated to provide the applicant with its best potential use. 405C, the standard, whether the zoning proposal will permit a use that is suitable in the view and the use of the development of adjacent and nearby property. My response, the zoning request will permit a use that is not suitable in view of the use and development of adjacent and nearby property. This is evident by the number of those which have signed the petition and are here tonight. 405D, again, these are standards in your Unified Development Code that you're supposed to use in evaluating your decision. Standard, the relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed upon the individual property owner, applicant, by maintaining the existing zoning. My response, any hardship imposed to the developer is by his own doing. The property was zoned Ldrb when purchased. Mr. Galloway has brought up tonight that the market did not protect the house. My understanding, the house was not on the market very long at all, did not have an opportunity for other buyers to look at purchasing and renovating it. 405G, the standard, any environmental, historic, cultural, or aesthetic concerns unique to the subject property or proposed use, and how applicant proposes to mitigate any negative impacts on surrounding properties and the community at large. My response, the developer has intentionally chosen not to mitigate any of the numerous negative impacts to the surrounding properties or neighborhood. I personally contacted Mr. Toland Sr. to discuss the proposal and offer up a solution. It's my understanding that he had the opportunity to contact numerous of other people in the community and did not. I contacted him. Upon meeting, to discuss a proposal and offer a solution which has the support of city staff and key persons in the neighborhood, I met with Mr. Jacobs. As an architect, let me back up. As an architect, I enjoy solving problems. I came into this seeing one side here and one side here. I spent my time drafting and looking for a solution that could be agreed upon on both sides. I presented that to Ms. O'Connor and Mr. Jacobs, went over that. I felt like they understood and felt like they liked the proposal. I know that they cannot present necessarily another proposal, but they had their own.
What was the number of houses that you presented?
That one had 10 on the 4-acre tract, and with a potential of probably going up to 18 with other future properties.
18 houses?
Not on the 4-acre tract. It's potential further development. I have copies of those. I also had a proposal that saved Camellia Hill House and provided 9 pieces of property on the 4-acre lot as well. I presented that. Upon meeting with Mr. Toland, I was told that any option to provide less than 15 houses on the 4-acre lot was not an economic viable solution to him. He also told me on multiple occasions that he is in this just for the money, even referring to the Milner development as a derogatory term. It is obvious that he has no interest in mitigating any negative impacts that his project creates. If the developer's application does not provide sufficient responses to these standards above, which I've just read, no way should the zoning board approve any rezoning request. In closing, if this request for rezoning is approved, please be aware that you will be voting against the City of Griffin Unified Development Code, against the City of Griffin Comprehensive Plan, against the unanimous recommendation of your appointed zoning board, and against the residents of the Forest Hills subdivision. Please keep that in mind when you make your vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. The next speaker, please.
Drew.
Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Drew Payne. I live at 434 East College, and I thank y'all for letting me speak tonight. I was searching for something to say that hasn't already been said, because you don't want people up here repeating the same thing. But I do want to echo that I agree with everything that has been said so far. I guess looking at a layperson, and you all are more professional than me because you do this every week, and unfortunately I just come forward when I feel like something is endangering our neighborhood and the citizens need to speak up. But I guess I would hang my hat on the fact that Mr. Galloway keeps mentioning, and he's mentioned this several times. Like, to me, the way I understand it, the house isn't in question. He bought it. He can tear it down. Mr. Toller can clear the lot. He can do whatever he wants because it's his. He can do it within what we have with zoning. And Mr. Galloway keeps talking about the house, that it's not functional as a home anymore. I don't understand why. He must have a legal reason for doing that. But Mr. Tolan Jr. last week in the P&Z meeting said, we bought the house within the first week. We put the contract on it within the first week, and we paid asking price. So I was licensed in real estate many years ago, but does that sound like something that was given a chance to be put forth as a single-family home? To me, as a layperson and as a former real estate person, it doesn't. And then the precedents that we will set for other developers coming in if we vote for this, that alarms me as a citizen, because I'm one of those people, I was born here, I was raised here, I moved away like everyone else, and I thought, I'm never going back. But then when I had the taste of the big city of Atlanta for 18 years and the traffic, and I watched those cul-de-sac lots go in all over Atlanta and ruin the charm of the neighborhoods. And you know, Griffin didn't look too bad. So about 9 years ago, I'm one of the people that Mr. Galloway suggests doesn't exist. So I moved back and I bought one of those big old houses, and I probably invested too much money because I probably couldn't get out of it what I've invested in it. But I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to be a member of our community. So I respectfully ask that y'all please vote to keep the zoning intact, not only for this one development, but potential things that could happen in the future. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Payne.
Mr. Payne. Yes, ma'am, please come forward. Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Kendall Jones, 820 Woodland Drive. To all board members, I would like to respectfully request all board members of the City Board of Commissioners to deny this rezoning request for Camellia Hill. I live on Woodland Drive and would be directly affected by the traffic, noise, and general decline of property value, having new construction homes in a very well-established community. While I'm not a native of Griffin, Georgia, like so many in the area are, I've lived here for over 15 years. What drew me to this area was the established community, the character of the homes. Building 12 to 15 homes and tearing down an estate simply does not fit with what this neighborhood or the people in this community are all about. Further concerns were brought up at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Mr. Galloway stated that the residents of the area were ignorant and have an emotional attachment to this house. As a licensed general contractor and licensed real estate, I see thousands of houses every year. I can assure everyone in this room I have zero emotional attachment to this home. From hearing Mr. Toland speak at the Planning and Zoning meeting, it is a foregone conclusion this home will be demolished by the developers. However, based on the age of the house, no one has provided any sort of documentation or breakdown if the house has been tested for asbestos and lead-based paint. As a general contractor and a certified lead-based paint renovator in the state of Georgia, there are many protocols that have to be met to demolish or renovate any home built before 1978. This home has an 89% chance of having lead-based paint and a 76% chance of having some sort of asbestos building product in the house. While the state does not put any restrictions on demolishing a house with lead-based paint, it does with asbestos. Something to consider, though, is that the state has a lengthy set of regulations in place for doing any sort of renovations on a home with lead-based paint built prior to 1978. If they have that in place, then why wouldn't a developer put in place protections for the demo, not only for the workers, but also for the residents surrounding the home? I have copies of the state regulations on lead-based paint and asbestos, as well as a letter from the EPA indicating it is highly recommended to use all recommended lead-safe work practices. My only emotional attachment to this dwelling is that of my health and that of my friends in the area during such work. If I remember correctly, many years ago, during the commission meetings regarding the tear down of the 6th Street Bridge, nothing was brought up about lead paint. And after reading transcripts following that of commission meetings, there was an additional expense because there was lead-based paint in the rivets and of that bridge that had to be torn down. And it was an additional expense due to all of the homes in close proximity to that house. Mr. Toland Jr. was quoted in the GRIP as saying the residents of Griffin are myopic. However, for a real developer to purchase a parcel of land and not perform their obligation of due diligence, such as traffic studies, infrastructure, environmental effects, current zoning, etc., for the type of constructions that they have in mind for that parcel is certainly, in my mind, myopic. I also certainly don't know how the city of Griffin power grid could possibly handle an additional 15 homes. My power goes out at least once a month, as it is. In conclusion, in my opinion, I feel that the Tolands are simply being petulant children who did not do their own research and simply expect everyone in the city of Griffin to bow to their wishes and demands, and if they don't get what they want, they will simply clear-cut the land, put in low-quality houses, which nobody wants. I think what all of the residents want here is to have an actual responsible and caring developer to build homes that would increase the value and aesthetics for the neighborhood and for the city of Griffin itself. I hope you carefully consider this request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Lynette, please come forward. Name and address for the record, please.
Ron Hoffman, 130 Milner Avenue. Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, in order to support this proposal, there are a lot of unanswered questions that really deserve some solid answers. And if you're truly going to do something very positive for the community, why not be fully transparent with what you're doing? The home in question, why was there a quitclaim deed done at the closing table and the property was purchased through a third party? Why not buy it outright? Would the previous owner have sold the property to the developer if they would have even known that this was the plan for the property? Why did the developer not make the sale contingent on the MDR zoning to allow the 15 houses, since that is what is required for his business case? That is a huge business risk to be in a situation like this. Was the developer promised some type of easy zoning change or zoning relief to allow for the higher density? If so, why and by whom? Did the developer expect resistance to his proposed development? And is he attempting to rezone the property rapidly without concerned citizens finding out until it's too late? Why was city staff working on a 12-home compromise for the developer without any community input at all? For both the proposals that the developer has made as well as on city staff,
Zero input or consideration was given for the neighbors in the immediate community. Ladies and gentlemen, our zoning ordinances exist for a reason. They have a purpose. They need to be upheld. And I humbly ask that you support the unanimous decision of your zoning board to deny this request last week. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another speaker? Please come forward. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
My name is Chase Neal. I live at 132 Milner Avenue. It's the property directly across the street on Milner. And I live there with my wife and my 6-year-old daughter. I bought the house 4 years ago. One of the big selling points was the beautiful landscape across the street. It's very aesthetically pleasing. There's probably 50-plus varieties of trees and shrubs. It was just a real draw for us. And you know, I'm concerned about loss of quality of life for me and my family. I won't speak on the pollution side of the construction. I think Ms. Bonnie said that well enough, but I agree with her. I'm also concerned about the safety of my daughter due to the traffic in the area. We got a highway on one side, and then Milner Avenue is a cut through for much of the traffic throughout Griffin to get to other parts in the neighborhood, as well as 16, and the city has designated Milner Avenue as a detour for school traffic with Crescent. So we already have a lot of traffic, and I believe we have 12 or 13 homes on Milner. We're going to double or more the residents on our street, and I'm really concerned about the traffic that's going to cause, being that the street is going to come, the new street is going to come directly across from my house, which all that new traffic is going to be funneling in front of my yard. So I'm really concerned about the well-being of my family, and I just feel like, you know, we got it right with the zoning for the property the first time. I asked that y'all deny the request for rezoning, and you know, I don't expect the developer to have the interest of the neighborhood in mind. He's out to make a profit, and I'm all for that. But I do ask our elected officials to please stand up for your citizens and do what's right on this vote. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Mr. Alexander, name and address for the record, please.
Gary Alexander, 709 Woodland Drive. Mayor and Commissioners, you've heard a lot of feedback from the citizens in our community that are not in favor of the rezoning as it is proposed. I, for one, personally would like to see the house maintained and kept and restored. And a simple solution to me would be if the present business plan calls for 15 homes and the developer and the builder don't feel like they can show a profit with less than that, then perhaps they put the house back on the market and sell it to someone who might be interested in restoring it and keeping it at its present property. And I think they might even turn a profit if they did that. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Next speaker, please. Any other speakers? Yes, sir. Dr. Gladley. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Hi, Dr. Earl Golightly. We moved here in 1991, and we've been pleased to be in the Griffin community, and we live at 628 South Hill Street, so we're just a block away from the proposed change, and we're definitely against having a change in the zoning, and we feel like the zoning is there to protect the neighborhoods and the property values, and also the safety in the communities, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. I think a gentleman in the rear raised her hand. Or, like, come on forward, ma'am. Sorry, we got a column in the way. Name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Amanda Sprayberry Creswell. I live at 727 Clay Street. I just wanted to reiterate really a couple of points I made last week at the zoning meeting. I know a lot of people have talked to the historic nature of the home and the neighborhood in general. And if you look at the U.S. Census Bureau, you can see that from 1970, we've lost 85% of our pre-World War II homes here in Griffin. So those are homes that were built before 1939. So the Camilla Hill House is in that last 15%, which, as many people have already stated, of course, it's their right to tear it down. But it is good to have a number with how much we've actually lost here in Griffin from our historic homes. I made another point last week as to concerns about how long this development is going to be disturbing our neighborhood. You can pretty easily look up some of the other developments that they've done in St. Simons and in Atlanta, most of which are still unfinished, which several of them were started back in 2014. So if that's any indication, we're looking at more than 6 years of having to deal with this disruption in our neighborhood, if not longer than that. And then finally, one other thing, I know that Ms. Ward, Mr. Holberg, and Mr. McCord, that you are all on the Griffin Planning Steering Committee for the 2018 Comprehensive Plan, and that's already been outlined pretty well as to how the Camilla Hill House property does fall into the traditional neighborhood, and you guys laid out some very well thought out guidelines for how to sort of protect and preserve that. So I would hope that you guys would please consider the work you've already put in for the betterment of Griffin and vote no against rezoning this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bergman. Next speaker. Is there anybody else? I see a finger pointing. Oh. Welcome, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Jeff Brandon, 525 East College Street. And hello to all, and as a resident of the city of Griffin, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to speak on this matter. I am not a public speaker, so I'm going to read some thoughts that I put together on it.
Yes, sir.
I won't get into the technical issues related to the request to rezone the subject property, as I think most, if not all, of that type information was covered in the planning and zoning meeting on August 17th, where the board voted unanimously to not recommend the request to rezone this property. Instead, I want to implore that you, as the elected representatives of this community who chose to run as Board of Commissioners to represent the residents of the city and who were elected to do so, listen to myself, to the others gathered here in opposition of this zoning request, and to all of your constituents who have also voiced their concerns about this request. And that each of you make the right decision by not approving this property, not approving the request to rezone this property. It is my opinion that approval of this request to rezone the property will have many negative effects on the adjoining neighborhoods and surrounding community of the subject property. Additionally, after hearing the comments made earlier by the developers team, I would like to add that developing the property as is presently zoned as a matter of right looked pretty good to me compared to the rezoning request that has been put forth here. And I would not have a problem living next to that as it is presently zoned. Also, as for the property not having been purchased and improved by a single-family buyer, this could have still happened in time instead of being made to sound like that the market would not allow it to happen. The home that we live in and many others in the area were on the market for a year or longer before they were purchased. And so I see that this is possible. That's not an impossible feat, nowhere near it. I am not opposed to the property being developed as it is presently zoned as a matter of right, but I am opposed to the increase in density of what the property is, the request that's being made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next speaker. Yes, sir, in the rear. Go ahead, come forward. Yes, ma'am. Welcome. Name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Brenda Warner, 712 Woodland Drive. I have nothing prepared, so I'm just going to speak right here. First of all, I could not agree more with what friends and family and residents behind me have had to say this evening. So thank you for having me and listening to me as I just go on the fly. From Clayton County, originally, and as you can tell by driving through that county, it is massively overproduced with businesses and with homes. At one point, I really had thought that you could go down and pick up a building permit just right on the front door. If no one was there and the door was shut, you just go get one and you can build. The second county that I raised my family in was Henry County. As you probably already know, Henry County was the fastest growing county in the southeast United States. About 4 or 5 years ago, it was the fastest growing county. So out of anywhere that I could have chosen to move to with a late husband who was a police officer with Clayton County, I could have chosen anywhere after his passing to move my family to a new start, because gosh knows there's a million houses to choose from in Henry County. You are elbow to elbow, and personally, I don't want to reach out to my neighbor and ask for toilet paper or Grey Poupon. So I like to spread my wings, and so out of all the places that I could have chosen, Griffin, I've made my home, and I'm very glad to be here. And what brought me here was the charm of these old rundown houses. I say that sarcastically and with a smile, because my home was built in 1938, and personally, I think she is absolutely beautiful, and she withstands the history, just like the Titanic we still talk about today. She will not sink. So she has a roof over her, and she's kept us dry. And yeah, the power grid thing, yeah, nobody warned me about that, but I can live with that. And I'm a proud homeowner right there on Woodland Drive. And so I would ask again that you would humbly consider not having so many houses in one place. And although we can't save this beautiful house, or we can, who's to say we can't? My pockets aren't that deep, but I sure would like to save that. But since we can't, if you would reconsider not so many homes on such a beautiful property. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Warner. Thank you.
The next speaker. Are there any other? Yes, sir. Name and address again for the record, please, Mr. Dutton.
James Dutton, 221 Laramie Road. I want to start by thanking everyone for the opportunity to come and speak. I want to mention that Newton Galloway, I really respect him. I think he's a really good attorney. And I know he's just zealously advocating for his client here tonight. And as a fellow attorney, I can't blame him for doing that. That said, there's been a lot of data presented in various maps, some of them incorrect, and a lot of statistics and pie charts, circle charts, and all kinds of stuff thrown out tonight. And as someone who additionally has a master's in public administration, I'm very well aware at how easily those statistics can simply be massaged to reflect whatever you want them to. Oh, look, I've got this many. Well, you've also got that many that aren't. Well, we can take this area and we can move it and flip it. Well, now you've gone from a corner that's a cul-de-sac that was built 40 years ago to a prominent corner on a highway that you're going to try to build right now post the zoning changes. Hey, there's a bunch of non-conforming. Let's make more. The data that they spoke about, what they quoted from the Flume, said that this won't be spot zoning because it's all residential. And so pay no attention to the type of zone, just the future land use. That's not the definition of spot zoning. Spot zoning is when you take an area that is contiguous with everything around it and has the same zoning of every single property that contiguously touches it, and you change that spot to a different zone. Not just low to medium or low to high, but low B to low C. This is also spot zoning. Medium, as was brought up earlier, is designed to be a transition between high and low. So if there's high and you want to move that high and sort of spread that zone, you can do that. If you're medium and you want to spread that zone, you can do that. There are no medium zones that touch this property. So if you take medium from somewhere else and you place it inside a map that is completely covered in low, that spot that you have rezoned has been spot zoned. That's not just my definition, that's the court's definition. And I'm sure that we'll all find out together, if you pass this, that the court agrees with what I'm saying. Additionally, the idea that they're going to pack 15 houses onto this 4-acre spot and then sell those 1,800 square foot houses for $300,000 to $400,000, okay, as I mentioned earlier, is either completely ludicrous or is a blatant lie. No house in Griffin has ever sold for more than $100 a square foot. And suddenly, these folks want to come in and magically double that by cramming 15 houses into one area? Now, they say that it's been done. They say, we've done it. Now, they say they've done it in Alpharetta, in Atlanta, in St. Simons, but they haven't. They've sold some of those homes for that much, but none of those developments are completed. Some of those developments are still in building phase from years and years ago. To say that they're going to come in and somehow magically do this one here in Griffin different, that Griffin is worth magically more than St. Simons, Alpharetta, Atlanta, is either ludicrous and delusional or a lie. They said it themselves. The developer came up here and stood at this microphone and said, and I quote, "The profit isn't there for us with just 12. If a builder comes and says, I can't build houses and make money, I'm not sure why that person is still in business. You can't build 8 houses and turn a profit? Then maybe you shouldn't have bought the land before anyone else could even look at it. But putting in a contract first week it's on the market, by giving the asking price immediately without even negotiating. That's a risk that they took, and now they want to transfer that risk to you. They want us to pay the price for their risk. Now, there's 100 ways they could have mitigated it. They could have made the sale contingent on the zoning change. They could have come in and said, well, if this, then that. There's 100 ways they could have done it. They failed to do so, and now they want us to pay that price. They showed some great photos. Boy, weren't those townhouses great? They showed some really great photos. You know who else has come in here before this board and showed some great photos? The folks that built Coldwater Creek, the folks that built Waterford on Ellis, the folks that built the condos, the townhomes, the vinyl-sided stuff that still stands mostly incomplete behind Food Depot. Boy, weren't their pictures great? Man, wouldn't it be great if that would have succeeded? How many times must this board be fooled into believing these absolute pipe dreams and get slapped in the face over and over and over? And it's us who's left holding the bag. It's us whose property values goes down. It's the schools whose property tax revenue goes down. It's the teachers who don't have enough funding now because we allow this sort of stuff to come in and happen. And we've done it over and over and over. Are you going to do it again tonight? We have 612 people on a petition. Voters here in Spalding County. Voters that voted for you. Voters that are counting on you to represent what they want in their community. There's more than 15 of us here today. A lot more. And there'd be more than this if we could be here in any number other than what we're specifically allowed. We have the building at cap. Those people vote. Those people want to vote for people who care about their community and who will listen to their voices.
Excuse me, when you say it is more than 15 of you, what are you referring to?
I haven't taken an exact count of the room, but I think there's more than 15 of us in the room.
I mean, what do you mean by when you say that?
I haven't taken an exact count of the room, but there's more than 15 of us.
Oh, okay.
So again, are you going to stand with the voters, the citizens of this community who care about their community? Are you going to defend Griffin and defend this neighborhood like you would defend your own neighborhood if someone came in and said, we're going to drop 15 houses on the corner of it? Or are you going to listen to someone, a developer who says, we can't make money if it's less than 15? Who says, on the record, I'm only here for the money, I don't care about anything else. They bought it taking a risk. They want to transfer that risk to us. The citizens have spoken. I hope that you will listen. Please, please listen to your citizens and vote against this voting change.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Is there anybody else like to come before the board? It's an open mic, your chance. All right. We're still in the public hearing. Is there anything else that, is that okay, Mr. Whalen? I'm just asking your.
Well, if you give him a chance to respond, then they're entitled to some rebuttal, I feel like. So.
I mean, we haven't done a zoning in probably a decade, so you tell me where.
If you will allow him to speak, then you're going to have to give equal time to the opponent. If they wish to say.
That's fine if that's what we're going to do.
Let me just be clear before we start. When we say equal time to the opponents, does that mean if he?
Anybody opposing, not every single one gets to have however much time that you know.
Okay, so if he's,
Fine, if he speaks for 5 minutes, all opponents get a total of 5 minutes for the entire group, not everybody gets 5 minutes.
okay. So a collective, if he talks for 10 minutes, there is a collective 10-minute rebuttal.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. Just want to make sure we're good to go. Okay.
So, just for clear, is anybody actually kind of keeping track of? Okay,
Thank you.
so that we're fair.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway.
Madam
For your
Commissioner,
patience.
I'll be brief. Number one, the information regarding the units that they have developed and sold. The units that they have developed and sold and the information about it, 3700 Peachtree Street is entirely sold. There is one house remaining for their Glenn County property. I don't know where that information comes from. Secondly, I certainly do not recall, and it is not my policy, and I would consider it ill-mannered to refer to anybody in a zoning hearing as ignorant. Everyone has the right to stand up and talk. Now, I did say that there was an emotional attachment from the neighborhood, and I'm in that neighborhood, and I have the same emotional attachment. But I do not recall calling anyone who stood up at P&Z ignorant. Secondly, with regard to contact with the neighborhood to mitigate, we reached out to representatives of the neighbors, and for a direct meeting, that meeting was never occurred. We were told to submit questions to us by email. That would have accomplished nothing. And then finally, MDR is transitional because you've got LDR, and then you've got apartments catty-cornered across the street that are commercial. It is transitional, and it's transitional at that property. Thank you.
Can I ask you one question, Mr. Galloway? When you said that mitigation, and this is a point that I have pushed the entire time, was that both sides get together and come up with a compromise for the greater good and a win-win for everybody. You said that you had an effort to mitigate, but you were told that you should use emails to mitigate versus having a one-on-one or a
That's
one-on
correct.
group? And
That's
who
correct.
was that told you?
Mr. Mayor, I prefer not to discuss that publicly.
Okay. But that wasn't, okay, that's fine. No, that's fine. That's
I
fine,
stick no way
you're
to
good,
handle it.
you have your respect. Okay, we got, it looks like about 3 minutes, is that? 2 to 3 minutes, so I don't know if there's someone who wants to say anything or what? Yes, sir.
Kirby Sisk, live at 132 East College Street. What you heard was a whimper of a losing argument. Mr. Galloway reached out to me, and I know Kenneth Moore as well, and I think a couple of others. No, didn't reach out to Kenneth. Reached out to Drew Payne, was the other one that was reached out to. We replied, he reached out to us after he lost a unanimous vote on the Planning and Zoning Committee Board. There was plenty of time to reach out before that if he wanted to. We replied to him and said, we're happy to talk with you. You need to just let us know what you want to talk about so we could come to that conversation prepared. We never heard another word back from that. The door was open, and you never walked through it. So that's the fact.
Go ahead.
Kenneth Moore, 672 Maple Drive. I'll speak to the Sunday before the P&Z meeting on Monday. I contacted Mr. Tolan Sr. by phone. The Monday morning of the P&Z meeting, I went out to his place and met with him then. All that was prior to the zoning meeting. After that, I was never contacted for a meeting or anything of the such. So all this was my effort, reaching out to him to find a compromise between the two prior to the P&Z meeting.
Got about a minute left. Is there anybody else that needs to say anything? Mr. Dutton, welcome.
Don't worry, I got a chime too. James Dutton, 221 Laramie Road. Your zoning in the unified zoning is defined. What was read earlier about mid-density is correct. It is for a transition from high density to low density. To say that it's not spot zoning because you're using it to transition between commercial and residential is not what your rules allow. That's not what you wrote down, and that's not what we're asking you to stick to tonight. Stick to your rules that you agreed to, that you came up with, and vote this down tonight.
All time expired? Okay, thank you, Mr. Conner. Does the board have anything to say or anything at this point? Are y'all ready to move on? Anything? Good? Just move on. Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your comments and concern. Okay, we still are in a public hearing. So next item is item 2 on the agenda, receive comments regarding a request for a special use permit to allow the use of a single-family dwelling unit in the Central Business District, CBD, for property located at 308 South 6th Street. Director of Planning Development, Chad Jacobs, will address. Good evening, Mr. Jacobs.
Yes.
I'm sorry, 508 South 5th Street. Thank you.
Great. So this is for a special use request at 308 South 5th Street. This is a property and it's within the Central Business District as previously indicated. This is in an area where a number of these these structures have been utilized as residential uses and also have converted over to office-type uses and have kind of moved back and forth. So what the special use option allows you to do is to give a property owner the ability to move the property from a use standpoint back into a residential nature. So that's exactly what's being requested here of the applicant. So what staff is recommending a conditional approval of the request with the following conditions: that the structure shall meet all requirements for applicable residential codes to bring the structure into compliance with respect to ICC, fire, and things of that nature. Additionally, if the structure reverts to a commercial use, then it must conform back to the commercial codes and occupancy requirements. Maximum occupancy based on formulas contained in statewide minimum building code, ICC, and fire and life safety compliance based on inspections. And then finally, upon vacating this location for its principal use, the special use permit will be void. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Nope. This is applicant here? Oh, okay. This is a public hearing. Would anybody like to make a comment in regards to this request? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Next public hearing item is item 3, receive comments regarding a request for variance from Cassandra Dorismund to reduce the front and side yard setback requirements from 15 feet to 0 feet and relief from the PCD parking lot requirements, which does not allow parking in front of the yard setback at 1157 Meriwether Street. Planning and Development Director Chad Jacobs will address again.
Correct. So if y'all take a minute to look at I believe we provided one of the attachments is a plat for this property. As you'll note, this is an extremely small tract. It's 0.083 acres, and it's a very odd-shaped tract. This is actually a property that was involved recently into our nuisance abatement program, and the property owner is working within that court proceeding to try to get it revitalized and brought back up to code. Obviously, given the nature and the age of both the building of when it was built and then when the property was cut in its current configuration, it creates some problems with respect to the current zoning codes with respect to setbacks and things of that nature. So given that the building is already there and she's trying to bring it into compliance, that's the purpose for asking for setback reduction on the front and the side from 15 to 0. Then also too, when you apply those setbacks to this property with its small size and configuration, you can't not but have the parking area, which would actually be to the side of the building. When you look on the plat that's provided you guys, it would just be, because you have that 15-foot front yard setback, probably one of the parking spaces would be encroaching into that. So that's the need for the relief in that parking portion. So, and we're, given the size of the building too, that's a little over 400 square feet. We're really only looking at one space, 2 with a handicap.
And this is the lot next to the old Spruce's Barbecue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mayor, that's what I was just going to add. This was not problematic for us as the city until recently because those 3 lots there, Spruce's, this little bitty building, as well as the one to the east of this building, used to all be owned by the same owner.
Correct.
It was split up, and Ms. Dorismond was the unfortunate purchaser of this middle lot without knowing that both 1201, which was Spruce's, and 1157 Meriwether were asked to be demolished in court. She has come in and worked with us as much as she possibly could in regards to the building itself and bringing that into conformance with nuisance protocol. But the only thing left is the zoning issues that are always going to remain non-conforming unless we grant this variance. So that's sort of almost the last thing for her to do in this instance.
And are there any conditions?
No, sir. We just recommend approval.
Does the variance stay, or does it revert from owner to owner, or?
If it's not taken care of within a year, then there's a reversion clause.
Great. Is the applicant here? Would you like to say anything? Okay. Are there any questions?
I do have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
The reduction of the setback is to bring the building into occupancy standards.
Setback compliance, because it was built in the 50s.
Right.
So it was basically built, and I think part of this is due to maybe potentially road widenings and things of that nature. The front of it is basically sitting right on the right-of-way line, not on necessarily the edge of the street. It's closed, but it's basically right on that right-of-way line.
And
But I guess I'm saying some of the nuisance issues is if the variance is not granted, is the building unoccupiable, unusable? What is?
No, but your nuisance standard, don't forget, is that you have to meet all codes applicable and adopted within the city of Griffin. So some of our codes are zoning codes, and so in order for her to meet those, technically, she would still fall under an illegal nuisance use because she wouldn't meet our codes. So we're just trying to clarify that. The actual occupancy of the building for what she wants to use it for, there's very little left that she will have to do.
Correct.
There was some awning issues, there was some, I think, maybe HVAC issues or some kind of
Yes, some
ventilation issues. All of those she corrected almost immediately, but we said you really can't do any more unless the commissioners say that you can through this variance process. So as far as the building sits, The building itself is usable, but we can't grant a CO because technically it's still a nuisance until this is done.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience like to speak or have questions in regards to this matter? Everybody good up top up here? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. All right, moving out of public hearing into consent agenda, we have items 4 through 7 that we may take as one. Do we have a motion to take
I
the
make a motion.
consent? Who made the motion? Ms. Murray made the motion. And second by Mr. Tinsley. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0 on items 4 through 7. Item 8, removed from the table to consider minutes of the July 28, 2020 workshop meeting at the City of Griffin Board of Commissioners, and the only one absent at that time, from what I see, was Ms. Murray. Do we have a motion to approve the minute?
All the ladies.
No, that's in the August 11th meeting, I
Oh,
believe.
you're on July.
No, the
That's-
July 28th meeting, the only people present were Commissioner Brock, Commissioner Tinsley, Mayor Holberg, and Commissioner McCord. Anybody can motion to remove it from the table, but the vote on the minutes is going to have to be only from those 4. We couldn't do it last time because Commissioner Brock was out with surgery.
So-
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so we've got a motion to lift from the table by Mr. Brock. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Tinsley with a second. All in favor, say aye. Or raise your hand, 7-0. Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the 28th of July.
Mr. McCord with the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Tinsley with a second. All in favor, signal by raising your hand. 4-0, and 3 abstentions. Is that correct? All right. And then item 9, consider minutes of the August 11th, 2020 regular meeting of the City of Griffin Board of Commissioners.
I'll make a motion. Second.
And that was Mr. Tinsley with the motion and Mrs. Murray with a second. All in favor, signal by raising your hand. And that completes that 7-0, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Or actually, Mr. Brock was not at that meeting, is that correct?
Yeah.
So it'd be a 6-0-1, Mr. Brock. All right. Item 10, consider a request to rezone property located at 670 South Hill Street consisting of 4.296 plus or minus acres, low-density residential, B, Ldrb to medium-density residential, MDR. And I'd like to make a motion to deny the request.
I'll second.
So motion by Holberg, second by Murray. Any questions or discussion? All in favor of the denial, please raise your hand. All against the denial? 4-3. And in favor was Brock, Tinsley, Holberg, and Murray. Item 11, consider a special use permit to allow the use of a single-family dwelling unit in the Central Business District for property at 308 South Fifth Street. Do we have a motion to approve or
I'll
deny?
make a motion.
Ms. Murray with a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Mr. McCord with a second. All in favor, please signal by raising your hand. 7-0. Item 12, consider variance request from Cassandra Dorismond to reduce the front and side setback requirements from 15 feet to 0 feet, and relief from the PCB parking lot requirements, which does not allow parking in the front yard setback at 1157 Meriwether Street.
So moved.
Mr. McCord with a motion, Ms.
Second.
Flowers with a second. All in favor of the request, please signal, raise your hand. We got 7-0 on that. Item 13, consider entering into contracts with Data Voice International and Text Power, Inc., best response bidder for the implementation of an outage management systems, OMS, and integrated voice response system, IVR.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Mrs. Ward with a motion. Who was the second? Ms. Murray with a second. All in favor, signal by raising your hand. 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Jennifer, for your hard work. Consider resolution appointing Susan Bartholomew, Executive Secretary to the City Manager as Assistant Secretary to the Commission. Ms.
Second.
Ward with a motion, Ms. Murray with a second. You sure you want that, Ms. Bartholomew? She wants it. All in favor, signal by raise your hand. 7-0. Welcome, we're proud of you. Item 15, consider resolution making appointment with the Office of Municipal Register and approving compensation for paid position.
Make a motion.
Ms. Murray with a motion, Ms. Ward with a second. All in favor, signal by raising your hand. 7-0. Item 16, consider purchase agreement between the City of Griffin and Petro South, Inc. This is an exciting announcement, folks, to purchase 1.49 plus or minus acres, tax map parcel number 013-24001, also known as 234 North Hill Street, in the amount of $775,000. Consider authorizing the loan drawn down up to $1 million from the City of Griffin's MEAG Municipal Competitive Trust short-term portfolio for the purchase of the building, closing costs and renovations, and amend the budget accordingly.
Make a motion. Second.
Ms. Ward with a motion, and who had the second? Ms. Murray? And Mr. Smith, would you like to just give a quick announcement of what the intent is before we vote?
Yes, sir. We have the opportunity to purchase the Petro South building just north of the railroad tracks on North Hill Street, where we have plans to move our police department from its current location on Poplar Street to the new location of the Petro South building on North Hill Street.
And Mr. Smith, great job with your efforts
you.
and working. So it's an exciting time for our Griffin PD. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0. Is Chief Yates, do you have anything to say?
Speech.
Not yet. It's going to take a few months before this all works out, but over the next 12 months, it should be ready to roll. Item 17, consider a resolution amending the organizational chart for administration, public works, watershed management, water, wastewater, and stormwater. City manager to address.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we've had some resignations here recently, one being the Director of Central Services, and it is staff's desire to somewhat reorganize. Central Services was a unique department that included solid waste as well as motor pool and facilities. To find someone with those unique talents, we feel like would be a little difficult. So what we'd like to do is make the solid waste department its own department, which would include residential solid waste, commercial solid waste, yard waste, landfill, recycling center, and all the things that go with solid waste, and make that its own department, because that is a handful. And then we'd like to take motor pool and put it under Public Works, as we would also take facilities and put those under the Public Works Department. We would separate the Public Works Department because, as you know, Public Works not only would include those, but also include streets, sidewalks, cemetery, golf course, parks, and all the unsundry things under Public Works. We also would like to make that its own department and separate it from what is now called Public Works and Utilities, which includes water, wastewater, stormwater, and public works. So that would become the Department of Watershed Management, which would only include water, wastewater, and stormwater.
Is that kind of the way it was?
So did all that
was?
make sense?
Wasn't that, was it ever that way before? Seems like it, like a long time ago.
Not in my
20
lifetime, but
Okay,
possibly,
20 years ago, I think.
possibly prior to that.
Something similar?
Ms. Ward,
Okay,
do
make a
you have
motion.
anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Ms. Ward makes a motion to approve. Second by Mr. Tinsley. Any questions or comments? All in favor, signal by raising your hand. 7-0. All right, we're rolling. Moving into city manager report.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, I've talked to Dr. Sanford with the Carl Vincent Institute, and I think she's had a little problem connecting with some of you. Very important as she is working on our 5-year strategic plan. I've had an opportunity, and several staff have had an opportunity to spend some quality time with her, but she is getting down to the point where she really needs to spend some time on the phone with you guys. So if y'all could make sure that you reach out to her. I think she sent everybody emails and contact information, so if you'll be sure to do that soon. Also, I want to thank staff for their hard work on the issues that were presented tonight. Under a lot of pressure, and after some exhaustive research and some due diligence, they presented a very fair and very appropriate response to a zoning application. They are professionals, and I know they have the best interest of the city in mind. It's very unfortunate that staff has been the target of some allegations of inappropriate and sometimes even some illegal conduct, and it's unfortunate that as professionals simply doing our jobs, that sometimes we end up as the scapegoat for people's personal preferences and personal agendas. So I just want to congratulate our staff and thank our staff for the very professional way that they have done their job. And that's all the comments I have.
Mr. Whalen? Mr. McCord?
Once again, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and this is definitely what we are, at least what I signed up for, and I love participation, whether I agree or disagree. I think that is your right to come out and to express what you'd like to see in your community. Griffin is bigger than just one community, as you all know, and we have some rezonings that'll be coming up in other parts of our community. And it's not always as equal as what you got here tonight. You know, on the other side of town and in an area close to my house, there are some of these same failures that were mentioned tonight. Now, I'd love to see some of you come out to some of these other rezonings that we have and put the same pressure that you're putting tonight on some of the commissioners to do what is right for the rest of the community. Because there are neighborhoods that have been destroyed, at least the residents in those neighborhoods feel that they have been destroyed. Their property values have been lowered, and by some of the people that are property owners here in Griffin that built on the other side of town, and it was voted and allowed with no objection. So when we make decisions up here, we have to look at how is this, what's the word, Cora? What is it?
Asynchronous.
Asynchronous is a new word that I'm trying to put in my vocabulary. But I want to see our town to become asynchronous, which means the same thing that we want on one side of town, we would like to see that on the other side of town. So thank you guys for participating. Feel free to email, call, text. I'm always a welcoming ear, and I'm glad to participate in any way I can. Thank you so much for coming.
Ms. Murray?
Thank you all for coming. What a amazing neighborhood that I live in. It's not just Forest Hills that we had text and we heard from. It was pretty much throughout the district and even some of Mr. Brock's district and then some. So what a great, overwhelming support for the community. And I'm humbled to be your elected official and still honored to be here, even though this is my very first experience with such a rezoning type issue. I didn't make really too many predetermined notions about it. I did try to remain open. I tried to listen. I'm extremely proud of the city staff. I know I've had probably some not very desirable conversations with Mr. Smith, but I mean, sometimes who can I sound off to, and I apologize for that. But you were extremely classy and just very professional and made me feel inexperienced, but that's what I am. So anyway, and Jessica, thanks to you, Mr. Chad Jacobs. I'm very honored to have a person of his stature to join our staff and bring forth the knowledge that he has. Mr. Galloway, I'm always honored to be in the room with you. I love everything you say. I like your expressions and the way you continue to serve Griffin and everything that you do. As your elected official, I mean, I too I'm very interested in growing the tax digest. I am very for investment property and bringing forth those developments. And I want to thank Mr. Lance Tolan and Mr. Lance Tolan Jr. and also Mr. David Brown, who had to leave. But I'm thankful for their interest, always thankful for the interest to come and bring new venture to Griffin and to bring new growth. And I do think there is a demand for such developments, but I live with a realtor. It's location, 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 right, Ms. Cindy? I mean, it's just, it is what it is. I go to bed at night listening in my head about comps, and I'm not a realtor. So, you know, there was never a doubt in my mind of that I would support the loudest voices and the most voices and the community voices and those who elected me. And you did an outstanding job. I've been here in this room where we've had lots of friction and tension, but I realize you all love each other and you have to see each other in the grocery store. And I'm really thankful for the way that you all came prepared and the hours of research and communication and the countless days that you reached out to one another and staff and the elected officials here. I know everyone here continue to hear from you. And the ones who called in and the emails, I think I was going through my mind, I can see Mrs. Blake and everyone from Utility Club. I think you all called in and texted in. And as the original members who built the city hospital during the time of after the war. I mean, I'll always look up to the leadership of these people who called in, and I can hear you right now. You're like, bah, 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 bah. I mean, but I'm grateful for that, and I have to be your voice, and I'm still honored to be your elected official. There's really not much more I can say other than thanking everyone. You know, I have to support your voice, and that's what I said I would do, and I hope that we can all leave tonight, and there is an answer. I don't know what it is, but I'm not sure how this will end. But anyway, good to see everyone. Thank you. Thank you, board. I know you're ready for me to shush. I get it. But thank you all. Mayor, thanks.
Ms.
Good night.
Flowers?
Okay, very quickly, because we have been here a very long time. I, like Commissioner McCord and Commissioner Murray, do want to thank all of you guys for coming. This is by far one of the most impressive showings that I've seen on the time that I've been on the board. The thing that I would like to say to you is, I think a lot of times it's very easy for us to assume what someone else's position is with very limited information. Listen very intently to everything that everyone in here says. Some of the things that I was struck by was, if any of us had a differing opinion, it was because we had colluded or done something underhanded, or that we had somehow tried to manipulate the situation. You know, did someone get money, or did we make promises that we couldn't keep? And the thing that I would ask of you guys, because you did have such an impressive performance, is to extend some of that grace and understand that some of us do have different perspectives. Because one thing that I heard was, would you be pleased if this development were in your neighborhood? And I can tell you that honestly, I would. I live in a neighborhood where something like this would be amazing, where there have not been any building permits pulled in my district in years. There has not been even the thought or concept of someone coming in and building 15 homes of any substantial value. So where I understand completely how you feel, and one of the questions that I even asked about the vegetative buffer is, it is very important for me to maintain the integrity of our community, whether it's on my street or on your street or on Milner, that I don't want this to be a city that when people come in, it looks degraded, it looks deteriorated. But to understand that having a differing opinion comes from different experiences and not from some negative place where I don't understand, or I've done something underhanded to try to, you know, not be considerate. Again, all I can say is another thing that was said is the history. There's a lot of history in this community that isn't positive. And so it's very easy to say we should all have the same experience of understanding and feeling the same way about the history, when that's just not the case. I live on a street that is full of less than quarter-acre lots. A lot of the homes in my neighborhood are significantly less than $200,000 in value. And where I understand that it would not have fit well into the dynamic of your neighborhood, I honest to God, would have been extremely grateful if someone had come in and said, we found a 4-acre tract and we're going to put 15 new, high-quality, expensive houses over here. That would be unheard of for me. So I don't want my vote in support of it for you guys to take it as me not being supportive of the community or not hearing your concerns or not caring about it. Again, I would just ask that you extend that grace to understand that my experience as a citizen of this community as a city commissioner, as a representative, is different from some of the other experiences up here. And you know, I mean, I received the emails, I also received the texts, I also received the calls. And I do, in a perfect world, I'm with y'all, the house would still stay there. If somebody would buy it, they fix it, and it'd be a beautiful asset to the community. That would be what I would want ideally. I don't have $350,000 to put on it. I probably don't even have 10. So all I do is hope and cross my fingers that, like, hey, magic happens and somehow that house is still there in 10 years. But I have been here long enough to see us deny some rezoning. And what happened was the people said I can put, legally I'm allowed to put this here. And I have a fair amount of fear at what it looks like if they come and cut 5 driveways on Hill Street. It looks very scary to me to think about what it looks like with 5 driveway cuts and absolutely no trees on the side of Hill Street. And so that is sometimes the gamble that we take sitting up here is, are they really gonna do it? Are they saying they're gonna do it, or is this just a threat to try to force our hand? But I have been here long enough to know that a lot of times they do it. That if it is within their right, they do. And that is why we do have some of these failed developments, because we did vote to not allow some of the changes that the developers wanted. And so they said, well, I don't need your changes. I can come in and put what's legally allowed, and this is what you're going to get. So just understand that my vote in favor of it was not about denying you guys' concerns or not acknowledging the 612 people who clearly stated that they were opposed to it. It was from a very broad and holistic concern for the entire city, because much in the way that you guys want your area maintained, I understand very clearly what Commissioner McCord said. Our city is only as good as the weakest parts of it. And so the concerns have to be for the broad community. I don't have the privilege to just only worry about one neighborhood. And so again, I am thoroughly impressed. You guys came here, you did your thing tonight. My hats are off to you guys. You did it. I like the signs. Like I'm very appreciative of it. But just please understand that some of these decisions aren't as easy for some of us, and it's not a personal attack if we don't agree with you. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Brock.
No comments, sir.
Mr. Tesley. Well, I'm gonna keep mine short and sweet. Representing the 5th district, I thought I was far away from this subject. Well, was I wrong? After the B&Z meeting last week, I had fielded probably at least 100 text messages, phone calls, emails, all opposing this rezoning. I don't represent just the 5th district, I represent the city of Griffin. I want to do what's best for my city. I moved here in 1988, was born and raised kind of toward Hampton, Henry County, got out of there, down here now. But I love my city, and I certainly appreciate you folks coming out. It's great to see all these 43 chairs, 43 back there, James. Yeah, 43. It's great to see these 43 chairs filled. So I appreciate your coming out tonight. Hopefully you'll come back soon. That's all I got. Thank you.
This word's passing. I just want to say congratulations to the chief and the community. This opportunity with Griffin Police Department relocation has been one of those bucket list things that we've been trying to figure out for a really long time.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was remiss in reminding everyone that's here tonight that we held to 9 o'clock, and it's Mr. Douglas Holberg, his 30th wedding anniversary. And I don't know what to say for Pam, but congratulations to him.
So I wanted to say this is a great opportunity for our community to give our police department the facility they should expect and deserve, and we look forward to working forward to that and getting them from the facility. So a great day. In regards to the rezoning, I have probably received several hundred emails, texts, calls, you name it, and never have a problem having an open door policy. But when individuals take personal attacks against me, our staff,
our board members in terms of us colluding with developers to line our pockets. I expect more from this community. I expect folks to, instead of going on Facebook and demonizing us that work very, very hard for this community, it's hurtful when people that you consider friends put hateful, spiteful comments on social media. So we are better than that, as Mr. McCord always says. I expect if one of my friends gets belittled on social media to call folks out. And I expect citizens, my neighbors, my friends to stand up for each of our character when people make hateful and derogatory comments. So my whole position through this whole thing is just like when we dealt with the Coldwater Creek development in 2004 and 2005, it was a split decision. Ldrb, going to plan residential development. I thought what we ended up getting is what we were going to get if we didn't figure out how to do something that was better for the community. And my hope was that the developer and the neighborhood would come together and brought a consensus and agreement that would be a win-win. And so my fear is what we're going to get, because I go down Milner every day driving at least 3 or 4 times a day and see that beautiful home. And it breaks my heart that it's potentially be gone, but what's going to go back there. So we're family, we're a community. I appreciate y'all's commitment, your dedication, your investment in this community. But at the same time, we need to support each other with good times, bad times. So on a lighter note, I want to say 30 years, I wore this tie 30 years ago. After I got married, it was 30 years and 4 hours ago and a few minutes ago. Pam came down the aisle. And it was, we met in North Georgia College. She charmed me. She dumped me at least a dozen or more times, and I kept coming back because I have a never quit attitude. But brought her back to Griffin. We've got 2 wonderful kids. They're both doing wonderful. But Griffin is our home. It is a blessing to be a part of this community. And I just want to thank each of you for your friendship and relationships. And hey, 30 more great years to come. But thank you all for being here. We meet here every second and fourth Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. And so we'd love to have you come back and get involved and have a great day. First by Ms. Ford, second by Ms. Flowers. All stand and leave.